back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. We have the usual crew here once again. My name is Brian Vitale. I'm your host. Joining me, I've got Josh Torres.
This is one for the books.
We have Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Glizio.
Here it comes.
And Chow Min Wu. All right, as we speak into the microphone now, we're recording this on Saturday, April 22nd. Already hard to believe that we are just over a week away until May. May, of course, is a lot of releases, including Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So as we go through April, we've had a few games that have come out that we want to talk about, some of them more surprising than others. We have a few people here that are also playing some other games behind the scenes that we can't talk about quite yet. So this podcast might feel a little bit different because we have a few things that we just might have to wait a couple weeks before we can open up and talk about openly. Until then, we're going to talk about the few things that have come out in April before the heavy hitters in May and June. In addition to the heavy hitters, in the last couple of weeks of the podcast, we've talked about primarily Zelda, of course, and Final Fantasy XVI. Looking over the outline of today's podcast, it looks like the theme here is mostly going to be other trailers for smaller June and beyond games. A lot of gameplay focused trailers in this lineup here. So those will be interesting to go through. But as always, we're first going to start out with a abbreviated games we've been playing section. Well, abbreviated and then also maybe a little bit different. More on that when we get there. Well, I'm going to open up here with one of the, I won't say major releases, but a release of the last week that came out on pretty much every console, and that is a new League of Legends story game called The Mageseeker. This came out just this last week. I've basically been playing any of these games that have fallen within the RPG or RPG adjacent umbrella. I do not play League, so a lot of these characters and areas are new to me, but I decided to download The Mageseeker and just kind of see what this game is like. We've talked about this, of course, as it's led up to its release this last week, how it's evocative of Hyper Light Drifter, how it's being developed by the same studio as Moonlighter, which was a fun Zelda-like that came out a few years ago. So I went ahead and downloaded this game just to kind of see exactly what it was all about. So The Mageseeker is a top-down action game with kind of a 16-bit Genesis kind of style art that stars a character named Silas. Now, of course, anyone listening to this that has like any League of Legends background is probably gonna grimace at like this novice trying to I'm learning about all these characters and all these places in this context for the first time.
This is the second time. There's the second like League of Legends spin-off thing that you're learning more about League of Legends, not by playing the game itself, but through other side projects they're doing.
Yeah. So I played, of course, Ruined King 2 years ago, I believe. There's been a few other projects, and there's a few that are also still in the works, but these are the two, Ruined King and Mageseeker, that are kind of in that RPG space. This one primarily focuses on the mages and the Mageseekers, which, of course, the game takes its title after. About the protagonist is Silas, and the kingdom of Demacia, or Demesia. I actually don't know how it's pronounced. I only know how it's written. So let me kind of tee this up based on how the characters and world is presented in this scope of this game. So it almost reminds me in a few ways of like of the Dragon Age Origins and 2, where in this area there are certain people that are born with magic abilities, mages, but they are persecuted. And basically this kingdom tries to wrestle them under their thumbs and keep them under control. And that's basically this police force is kind of how they're described as the Mageseekers. And Silas is a Mageseeker initially in a flashback or in the background in the premise of the game. However, he eventually learns that he kind of has a unique magic power where he can steal the abilities of other mages and use them temporarily. The game is kind of coy about whether or not this makes Silas himself a mage or just someone that leeches off of mages. But either way, he has kind of this unique ability that's kind of bespoke to him. And then the kingdom basically puts him in jail for 15 years. He ended up accidentally killing, I believe, a boy and his family in this flashback. And I don't know if these events are detailed more thoroughly in other avenues, but he's put in jail and then he ends up breaking free by using his ability to steal the magic powers of one of the crowned royalty, a major character named Lux, who I was aware of even before playing this game, and then is basically hell-bent on revenge against the kingdom. And he's basically framed as this single track, simple-minded, revenge-focused character. So not very sympathetic.
He's just like me.
Kind of.
Fair.
Sorry.
I know.
Yeah, but
Thanks.
he's not framed as like a typical protagonist. He's very much like, I don't want to band together with these goody two shoes. I want to fight. If I'm not fighting, I feel like I'm wasting my time. My single focus is revenge. These guys put me in jail for 15 years, et cetera, et cetera. But then he's met a few characters that are effectively like a resistance group comprised of other mages that are also looking to fight back and have an area that is free for all mages to exist peacefully, etc. So basically, that's kind of the main conceit of the narrative. The gameplay, we've compared it so often to Hyper Light Drifter based on the footage, and I've kind of returned to that well over and over again because I've played Hyper Light Drifter. I have not played Moonlighter, which is the other game from the studio. And this studio is what? I want to make sure I actually get the studio right.
Digital Sun.
Yeah, I was like Digital Sun.
Off the top of my head, I think they are Spanish.
I don't know.
Let me check.
All right, while you check on that. So so far in this game, I'll talk about the gameplay first, some of the systems second, and then maybe a little bit more on the story third. First of all, this game just seems really kind of breezy and light and kind of very, very focused. It's very pick up and play. It doesn't seem like it's going to be too long. I've put about 4 hours into it, and it actually has like a percentage completion on your save file. And I'm already like 40% done. So it looks like it's about a 10-hour game. That's being completionist. I bet if you mainlined it, you could do it faster. So it seems like it's a very breezy, kind of simple, short title, which might be to its credit because it doesn't necessarily have to be any longer than that. But this game, you have a character who you have, it starts out, it has a very good tutorialization through the first couple chapters as more of the gameplay systems and progression systems are unveiled and revealed to you as you go through. So you start out and you move with your analog stick, and you have a light attack and you have a heavy attack. Heavy attacks can break through shields. Light attacks just do damage, and you have a dash that dodges abilities. And the dash also, not only does it reposition your character, but it does have like evasion frames, so you can like dash through enemy attacks. So very, very conventional so far. How it gets a little bit unconventional is that Silas has like this tether, which is, if you look at any of the key art, it's those chains that are attached to his gauntlets that he can use to latch onto enemies. You do this with like the shoulder and trigger buttons of your controller if you're playing with the controller. And what this allows him to do is it allows him to do three things. One, it allows him just to grapple as if it were a grappling hook. So this is obviously kind of used for zone traversal. Like if you see a gap and you see a target on the other side of like a broken bridge, you can grapple to it, etc. So that's pretty straightforward. But it also allows you to grapple to enemies, and if that enemy is a spellcaster, you can then steal their spell. You use, I believe it's the left trigger to, if it's like a fire mage that you're trying to, early on, the very first level is you're trying to escape from the capital city, and the Mageseekers are coming after you. Some of them cast fire spells, some of them cast ice spells. And you can latch on to enemies using your grapple hooks and steal the fire spells from these enemies, and then use the right trigger, the opposite trigger, to launch them back. Of course, this starts out with a very basic premise where you've got fire and ice mages, steal the spells from the fire mage, cast them at the ice mages, and vice versa. So that's like, okay, that makes sense. And then as you go through, you meet mages that cast like wind spells that do shields, and then you eventually learn how to tier these up, and it ends up becoming like this whole progression system where once you steal a spell for the first time, you can then upgrade it, augment it, slap multiple spells at once, etc., etc. So this system is kind of fun because these are all very basic, simple ideas that end up kind of melding together in a way that ends up making it quite dynamic, where you'll have characters that are charging at you. So of course you've got to use your melee attacks and your dodges to avoid damage. While these spellcasters usually that are further away from you are, slinging fireballs and ice shards at you, and you've got to like latch onto them, steal their spells, redirect with the right analog stick, and launch them back at the other characters or at the non-magic enemies, all while dodging and doing physical attacks. Using physical attacks builds up your mana and allows you to cast your own spells. So in general, the gameplay is a lot of simple systems that just mesh together in a very honest and genuine kind of easy to understand way that's not overcomplicated, but not also too simple.
Does it feel like the variety of spells that you get throughout the game? Does it feel like it changes up the gameplay substantially? Like, do you feel like you're having to like employ like different tactics against different kinds of enemies, or thinking about like to try to change it up the way you play?
A little bit, and like I said, I'm only 4 hours in, but even though it is a shorter game, seemingly based on the completion, but like some of the spells, for instance, you the first fire spell that you learn is just a fireball. You aim it and then you fire it. Then the second one you learn is it drops a fire field at your feet. So basically, how to use that one effectively is you grapple onto the enemy, because you can grapple yourself towards enemies as well as like targets, then drop the spell, then dash out. Like, so like there's a little bit of dynamicism there where instead of just slinging spells, you're encouraged to get close, not only use melee abilities, but drop spells at your feet and then leave. There's also some spells that put like a shield around you that periodically damages anyone that's close to you. So it kind of encourages you. But you have a very basic allotment of stats. I believe the stats are HP, mana points, attack power, magic power, and one other thing I forget, but very basic. It's like 4 or 5 basic stats, and 2 of them are strength and magic. So you're kind of encouraged to do a hybrid play style based on how the spells are designed, and just based on how what combat encounters are delivered to you with both characters that attack you up close and characters that pelt you from far away. And usually they'll interact with the map design as well, where enemies will be like on the other side of gaps or bridges, or they'll fire at you from ledges where you can't always get close, so you have to sling spells, or you can grapple to them if you want to, like if you're out of mana and you need to like recharge it by using them with your melee attacks to recharge your mana, things like that. I will say the pace is a little bit slower and more deliberate than Hyper Light Drifter, just in terms of like how quickly you move, the speed of the animations. It's a little bit more, a little bit stiffer. I kind of wish it was a little bit more fluid, but that could also just be my preconceptions, where I expected the game to play at a certain pace, but it doesn't quite play at that pace. It plays a little bit slower. So it's not bad. It was just different from my expectations. As for the general progression, it has a lot of tried and true sort of things that we see in a lot of games, either RPG or RPG adjacent games these days. Like very, very early on, you're introduced to Surprise, a hub of sorts. And this hub has like a place where you can upgrade spells, a place where you can upgrade your stats and have a skill tree, and a place where you even can like recruit outcasts or recruits to basically have aligned in your like resistance group. And usually these people are also spellcasters, and they don't actually appear on screen. Like, it's not like you have these characters following you. But for instance, one of the very earliest outcasts that you get with you, his name is Lorne. He's an ice mage. And if you quote unquote bring him with you on a mission, what it does is that it powers up your ice spells and makes some of your melee attacks have ice attributes. And then there's one, I unlocked both a fire mage and a wind mage as well. So there's basically there's elemental kind of spell kits. Then you can kind of align that with having a support character that augments those abilities and changes them. And of course, you might want to adjust which one you use depending on which enemies you're fighting in any given area, because they might have a particular weakness that you want to exploit. And the game is kind of semi-mission based, where you literally, and this is not something I was expecting, you go to like a war table. On that war table, you have main missions, and these main missions will say like, hey, you go to this area, you'll be expected to encounter these types of enemies. Or you have side missions where it says, hey, in this area, you'll get something extra, you'll get some more money or whatever, but encounter these types of enemies. Or there's actually missions that are like dispatch missions, where as you recruit outcasts and support units, you can literally send them out to basically increase their strength passively as they go out on these dispatch missions. So I wasn't really kind of expecting this game to have like a mission-based structure, because I was expecting it to kind of be more Zelda-like, semi-open, where you kind of have like a central area, then you explore out from there. But it's a lot more arcadey. It's a lot more choosing levels from a list or from a map, taking them, and then bringing the rewards back to base.
That's pretty interesting, actually. I wouldn't have expected that either.
Yeah, because obviously, again, to use the Hyper Light Drifter comparison, that game it's basically like you have an overworld map, and as you unlock more abilities and get stronger, you can kind of venture out in different directions and kind of unlock each area, each region on that map, which you then eventually take back, like as it all funnels into a common endpoint. Where this, seems a lot more
I can kind of
linear.
appreciate that, because like I assume like each of these levels are very distinct, different, and like their level designs really complement like the gameplay that they're going for. So instead of like trying to make like a cohesive like open zone or open world structure that like maybe levels have to kind of like make sense aesthetically. Maybe that would like kind of affect the level design mentality going to the game, and maybe I assume like what you've played so far, I'm gonna have to assume like maybe the level design in this way like maybe strengthens the core gameplay more.
I will say the level theming is definitely different from location to location. You start out in the ruined capital, you go to a dark forest, then you go to like sort of like a science fortress, then you go to like a seaside town. So thematically they're very different. I will say that the design is so far pretty this similar from place to
Oh,
place.
okay.
It's quite linear. Like you'll have an access to a map. The map very clearly highlights where your destination is, and it's kind of like Octopath Traveler 1 and to a lesser extent 2, where it's like you might have an obvious fork where it's like, aha, if I go to this fork, it very clearly has a dead end. So very clearly there's going to be something there, and it's either a treasure chest or a piece of lore or a character you can recruit. So it's basically, it's almost like it betrays itself, where it's like if there's a dead end on your map that you can see, you know that there's always going to be something there for you to pick up. So you're always going to
I
go
know,
do
yeah.
it.
But to be clear, we're not just picking like that's a lot of like RPGs in general, right? Like a lot
That's
of like
true. Final Fantasy 13 is what I'm thinking of now.
yeah,
But
FF10 even, just like
yeah, that's another
it's a
one.
common thing in like
Mm.
just dungeon design and art like a lot of RPGs
Yeah.
more than you.
There so far I haven't really encountered anything that's quite puzzle like. There like so far I haven't encountered any like switches or moving platforms. I have encountered a few places where like on the map it doesn't clearly show that you can go somewhere, but you can like head under a bridge or into a grove of trees, and you end up with like on a place where if you pull up the map you're technically off the map. I'm not sure if I'm describing that well, but if there's like the map clearly shows where you can go, but there are also hidden areas you can go that aren't clearly shown on the map. So you kind of have to look a little bit at the context clues of visually what you're seeing and not just adhere to what the map shows and say like, oh, there's an opening in this clearing of trees. I bet I can go in there. Waha, I can. Here's a treasure chest or whatever. Um, so that kind of explains the gameplay and the progression. And it's very straightforward. It's very easy to learn. It's very simple. But I'm not saying that with any sort of judgment. I'm actually kind of enjoying that it's just very casual, very breezy, and kind of just you're just kind of enjoying just the vibes and it's easier than Hyper Light Drifter so far. But there are a ton of like there's like a difficulty sliders where you can make you do multipliers more or less damage, enemies do more or less damage. So you can kind of tweak this up or down to whatever extent you want. I was just playing on normal, all slider set center, et cetera, and I'm finding it pretty easy. But obviously that's kind of my choice at that point. The one thing I will say that it's a bit disappointing, but that's kind of stating it too strongly. Just something that I wish was had a little bit more to it is that so far every single treasure chest or every single collectible or in this game pretty much is just currency. It's basically just like a gold pouch and it has a number. Like you have 300 gold, you have 1,000 gold, whatever. Every single treasure chest just has gold so far. So there's no interest or excitement about what am I going to get materials? Am I going to get weapons? No, there really is no gear. There's no like things like that or perks in that way. It's just gold. And you use gold to tier up your spells, to tier up your stats, etc., etc. And it's just kind of like it's like a catch-all currency that again it's simple and it works, but I kind of wish there was a little bit more to it. Just so that had a little bit of excitement because it's kind of interesting where there's like basic chests, and then if you go to a secret area, there's a gold chest, but it just means it has more gold in it, and it's just one of those things where it's like, the flavor of it is a little bit kind of bland, but it kind of fits with the vibe of the rest of the game in terms of not overcomplicating things, just having something that works and is well understood and easy to digest. So I'm okay with it, but I kind of do wish there was a little bit more to that. I do
I'm
think
gonna ask you the same. Sorry, just real quick. I'm gonna ask you the same question that I did 2 years ago with Ruin's Story. Does this make you want to install League of Legends and play that and learn more about the core lore?
absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say this game does do some things that are very clearly for the benefit of the player in terms of we bet that this person doesn't know League lore, so we're going to tell them. For instance, I said that you're playing as Silas. You end up stealing the magic from a character named Lux, who is a character that even I recognize that name. And then you meet the character's brother named Garen. And basically, because you utilized Lux's magic to get out of jail and exposed her as a mage, Darren is very upset at you, and he's the first boss fight. So Lux and Darren are brothers, and they both have a bone to pick with Silas. But however, Darren says, the line is written like this: "My sister Lux will never forgive you," or whatever. And it's like, that's not what they would say. If these characters already have rapport with the three of them, he would just say, "Lux will never forgive you." He would not say, "My sister Lux." I know I'm completely nitpicking, but it's one of those things that just kind of, it's one of my pet peeves where it's like,
my father, the king. It's like, yes, we know you are the princess.
It's like, why would these three characters have known each other for 15 years. Why would he introduce his sister as "my sister Lux"? He would just say Lux. I'd rather they just do that and allow context clues to fill the gaps, but they don't do that. And I know that's a complete nitpick. Like, Brian, let that one slide. I'm like, all right, it's a nitpick, but it's I know, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is written in the understanding that there are many people playing this game that don't have any of the background. And of course, the game does tee you up a little bit. It gives you a bit of intro, but it's presumably very, very abbreviated at a high level. So,
what the game should do is, like, for more context, go play League of Legends TM.
Yeah,
that's what the game should say. Like, editors or translators know at the top.
Yeah, but yeah. So, like I said, only a few hours in, but I really don't think there's a whole lot more to it. It's a very casual game, pick up and play. It's priced, I think, at like $25 or $28, something like that. So its price kind of reflects that. And I mean, it's a nice break from playing some of our much longer RPGs like Octopath Traveler 2. Or I kind of earmarked a little bit of time here to talk about another game that I've been playing just a little bit of. This is a game we talked about last week, so I won't dwell on this for much more than like 5 or 10 minutes. But last week, Josh, you introduced us to another April release, and that was Wartales. It was a game that I wanted to get to, but I hadn't quite last week. But since then, I have put about 20 hours into it. So nice. Obviously, Mageseeker, very easy breezy game that I should hopefully be able to beat by the end of the weekend. Wartales, like you kind of stated last week, could get very, very long. Not something you necessarily want to marathon through, especially as a lot of other games are releasing. To tee it up just a tiny bit, again, like you stated last week, you kind of pick from a preloaded set of mercenaries with different kind of implied background. And then you are kind of set out into the world where there really is no clear overarching narrative to begin with, but you have kind of a collection of individual stories. The way I was describing it to Adam earlier this week is they're almost kind of like micro quests, where you start out in a region of the world. You pull up your map, and it'll explicitly say that this region has X many locations, ranging from cities to buildings to towers to like an infested rat nest. And as far as I can tell, basically every location, not every location, but one per location will have some sort of micro quest assigned to it. Sometimes the micro quest is literally just kill the bandits here. Like, the bandits have occupied this tower, defeat them and open the treasure chest, you win. But sometimes they are a little bit more involved, where it's like, hey, my sister ran off towards the direction of the windmill. Can you go find her and bring her back to me? Or you go to a jail and they say our prisoners escaped. Can you track them down? And then, of course, once you do track them down, you usually have an option of either killing them, turning them in, or bargaining with them, letting them go free or whatever. And that's kind of this game in a nutshell. Even through 20 hours, there is no major overarching narrative. There are some narrative themes that tie together, but there's no like big bad. There's no central antagonist. There's no central plot line, at least yet. But instead, it's more just general themes about, oh, there's refugees coming from this location. I forget the name of the city. It starts with a G. I don't
Yeah,
quite remember, but I don't quite remember the name of the city, but it's because I haven't been there yet. I've only heard it mentioned. It's like, oh, okay, I wonder what's going on there. I bet there's a lot of turmoil there. And then in the second region of the world, it's being kind of it's a farmland, but all these farmlands are being corrupted by like this invasive root species. And it's like, is this a magic spell? People are blaming each other. Like, how come we're gonna die if we can't farm our crops? And this basically like a lot of the stories will tie into that problem. And I've actually really kind of enjoyed how this game is. It's in a lot of ways a very traditional CRPG, turn-based, like the way that you described last week. Very similar pace to a lot of other turn-based games, but it's still in a way a little bit kind of pick up and play because you can pick it up, do a few little micro quests, like do a few little locations, and then turn it off. Because you always kind of feel like you're making progress in terms of getting resources, getting better gear, recruiting new team members. I did not realize like this game you can catch wild animals.
Yes.
So like I was fighting a group of boars, and there was like regular boars, and then there was called like sovereign sow or something like that, like the mama boar or whatever. And then I got it weak, and then when I went up to fight it, because I had rope in my inventory, it was like, you can catch this if you want. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna catch this boar. What does that do? And now on my team, alongside of mercenaries, I've just got a pig ally. It acts on its own.
Awesome.
It does what it wants. You can like eventually learn how to craft animal gear that makes it more effective. I ended up getting 2 ponies, one of which was, which you mentioned this last time, one of which has like the saddlebags, makes you move faster on the world map, and the other one was like, do you want to turn this into a war horse? You can craft armor for it. It'll show up on the battlefield. It'll like the boar. It'll do what it wants, and it's just always kind of fun. And it's a little bit like emergent storytelling where I'm having my characters like, I have a tank, I have a brood, I have a rogue-like character, and then all of a sudden the horse will just like come galloping in from the side and like gallop through someone like an enemy unit and take it down. Like, oh, thank you, horse. I wasn't expecting that, but I appreciate it. So
yeah, the neat thing about that too is like that system can get like deeper if you want to. Because I started a co-op playthrough with 2 other friends, and they're much more experienced at the game, have more time in the game than I do. And then our campaign is still ongoing. It's probably gonna be a long thing. But like I've learned so much with them, like as they've been like kind of playing the game. Like I kind of like take it like they're kind of like the drivers of the campaign, while I'm just like the save data manager, and just like kind of seeing like, you know, because you can like freely like roam around the map, but like it's all in a leash, so you still have to kind of stay together for it. So you can't actually go off to the 4 corners of the earth on your own. But since like the game doesn't really have like an upper limit on like max party members, like
no, as far as I can tell, you can recruit as many people as you can pay and feed.
Yeah, and it's like it's crazy. Yeah, so and then you can divvy up like the amount of playable characters between you. So it's like, say like you have like 15 people you field, like each you can have like 5 under your wing, or like you can like transfer ownership like at camp, and then like one can be like managing like 7 or 8, while someone's like 2 or 3 if they want to be on the, you know, they don't want to manage too many people. But like the pet system, for example, is really interesting because like you say they act on their own, but like, you know, but if you get like someone to like either like class it like Beastmaster or a profession, I'm not sure, but there's like a Beastmaster aspect to it where you can actually start getting like direct control of those captured animals, and some of them have like bonuses depending on how many of the same type that you capture. Like if you capture 3 alpha wolves, for example, they'll get like a bonus of like plus 50% crit.
Wow, I did not know this. Like, but
exactly.
I had done some micro quests that like unlocked the assassin specialization, so I'm not surprised that that's a thing. But like some of these micro quests give you just money or resources, or here's a new sword. But it's like, you've unlocked the assassin. Like, holy shit, I've unlocked the assassin or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's like like that game is like a nice treasure trove, like surprises that you'll just like learn either organically through the game, or like you'll just like be talking about it with someone, or start like playing with someone and be like, that's crazy, you know. And they're always talking about like, you know, what they're doing in their playthroughs.
And like I haven't messed with this too much, but pretty much all of the quests in this game, either story or side quests, they interface with the game's systems itself. For instance, I had a story quest in the second region that I went to where I had to kill this invasive like disease root species. In order to do that, I had to have an alchemist, which is one of the professions, go to the alchemy table, learn the recipe for the antidote, find the materials used to make it, which included like getting like some of the region specific wine and like distilling it with a certain other vegetable or whatever. Have the alchemist actually make the item in my inventory, go to the place and use it on the thing like you would any other item. Also, like there's a system where, like I mentioned in the example of bring these prisoners back to me, like catching prisoners it's not just unique to that quest. It's something you can just do. If you go to a jail, you buy chains, you go to a fight and you're fighting bandits or rogues or whatever, you get them weak. Instead of killing them, you can, for any human in the game, I believe, unless it's like a story one, capture them, have them in your party as prisoners. I think you can still deploy them as well. They have a chance of running away from you unless you like build stockades in your camp, take them back to the jail and sell them for, return them to the jailer for money. So it's just neat that basically none of the quests are cinematic in a way where it's like, this is bespoke to this quest. It's just, you can do this. You can capture prisoners. You can make these serums. You can train wolves.
Like, an interesting thing about that too is like in terms of like prisoners, like when you go to camp, like the position of the camp matters. So they're too away far from the fire, for example, they might run away in the middle of the night when you're sleeping, or they might, or their condition might just worsen, which will degrade their value. And there's also like some traits like for animals that like can like affect like your camp as well. Like say you captured like a wolf, but one of its traits is loud snorer. Like you actually have to position it away from like the campfire, away from everyone else, so it doesn't disturb them.
I've actually had that happen with the boar.
Yeah,
where it's like the boar has woken up. I named some of the characters. I do this with XCOM type games or games like this where you just have a generic roster of characters. I named one Brian, one Adam, etc., etc. I didn't use any of your names, and it was like the boar snored and woke Adam up. Their relationship has decreased or whatever. Like I've got a bone to pick with it. I got a bone to pick with this snoring boar because it woke me up in the middle of the night. Anyways, I will say so I'm pretty high on this game. It's something different and unexpected. I will say though that it is it doesn't have a lot of fanciful fare to it. I asked you last week if it had any sort of fantasy elements to you, and you said no. And it's very, very light. There's like the ghost animals that show up at night.
Yeah, I started running to them too, but that's about the extent that I've seen.
And then there's like the blighted rats, which are like grown to ginormous sizes, which is kind of semi fancy because obviously, but the thing is that the game is very down to earth. It's very like there's no dragons burning down citadels, sort of things to it. So it doesn't have a lot of that like climactic punch to it. To me, I'm not bothered by that. I'm actually kind of enjoying that it's a lot more grounded. The quests are, I wouldn't say realistic, but they're in a way where they're minor little stories each and of themselves, even if they're not culminating to anything that's like meant to be the set piece of a movie. So I'm kind of enjoying the fact that it's just kind of low key, and kind of just metered in that way. But I could see how some people might need a little more than that. They might need a little bit more motivation. I'm doing okay, but I could see other people dipping their toes in and getting a little bit bored. So I'm just trying to play like devil's advocate there, like someone who would bounce off this game. Why would they bounce off? Well, maybe they needed a little bit more punch or a little bit more something driving the plot a little bit more, which doesn't quite have that.
I will say though, like for people who are like on the fence, I'm like maybe like how is the co-op experience in this game? It is. I love it so far. I've been loving the co-op experience in this game with like two other friends. Like there's only maybe like a few bugs here and there. Like say some merchants don't work at times, so we have to save the game then reload our session. But it's all very easy to like rejoin everything, and the only thing that's like the biggest hurdle is like if someone has like a weaker machine, you have to wait for them to load into the map, because sometimes for slower PCs or less powerful PCs, it'll take like a bit to load it in the map, so you have to kind of wait for everyone to get in. But other than that, it's been kind of like pretty much when they go into town, like they're pretty much doing all the decision making in town. You can kind of like see in real time what they're doing in town because it goes through like from screen to screen and like following what they're doing. It's also funny, like sometimes not for all mini games, but for some mini games you can see like they're timing it if they're off or not, so you can kind of like ridicule like your friends if they're like off the timing in some of the mini games. Sometimes it doesn't like track the mini games that like what you're seeing on screen, but like it's a pretty nice like co-op experience. You never really get left out. Like you feel like like you're always like working with each other because of how the way battles flow and the way that the gameplay kind of emerges from that game. You always feel like all of you are like working and striving together for something instead of like the rest going on and like you're feeling left out or they're pushing forward too fast. It's like no, you're really all in it together. Every player matters in the experience. So I think it's like a well balanced experience no matter what skill level you are. And I learned something new from them, every time because they're so experienced about it. And even then, they still have fun with it because a lot of like funny stuff happens. Like for example, we name all of the people that we meet and even the pets that we meet like after other friends in it. So we have a friend. His screen name is Beansy, and he's kind of like the fall guy in our group, kind of like the jokester, the one that we likely pick on.
He's like your group's Chow.
Yes. It was really funny one time because he was our archer, or not an archer, but like he was someone that like he like a ranger that like threw a throwing knife. But the throwing knife missed and it hit someone at the back of the head, and he learned to trade cross-eyed. And then so back at camp, like a few days later, it's like okay, what are we gonna do about Beansy? I'm still pissed that he threw a throwing knife at the back of my head. What are we gonna do about this? Like that's like one of those camp events that like, and then we took a screenshot of it and shared with our friend group. We all laughed and like, what are we gonna do with Beansy? And it was
I've had my archer hit a friendly unit in the back of the head, so yeah, there is friendly fire. You got to be careful. And then the characters can learn traits based on what weapons they use and battle outcomes. Like one of my guys took a critical hit from an enemy, like it like wrecked him. Luckily they don't die immediately, but he learned the trait like something that makes him take less damage from critical hits going forward. It's like, well, I'm glad you just ate shit because now you're going to eat less shit going forward, because apparently that helped train your body at how to eat critical hits from great axes. And I know we're over the 10-minute mark that I stated here, but oh well, it's a fun game that's kind of surprised me. I will say one of the other negatives that I have, and I've gone up on like the Steam forums to see how prevalent this is that I do have like hitching problems, especially with some of like the mini games, but like every 2 minutes or so I'll have like a second hitch. And it's whenever that happens, I'm like, oh crap, is something wrong with my computer? Do I have to finally upgrade? And then I go to the Steam forums and there's like threads about lots of people having issues with the hitching. So I'm like, all right, it's not just me. But it is a little bit frustrating, especially with like some of the mining and blacksmithing games, which require a bit of timing.
I've been having that problem too. Like one of my friends suggested, booting it up through OpenGL, and modifying it through that. And they said that it helps quite a bit with the hitching problem if you launch it in OpenGL. I have to remind myself to do that as well and look at how you do that.
And I saw some people say like, reduce the number of saves games you have only one save game, it works better. I'm like, that seems like superstition, but I had the exact same thing happen with Pillars of Eternity 2, where I had a huge number of saves and that slowed down my game. And I'm like, all right, I'll maybe I'll just stick to 2 saves. I don't know. I'm willing to try anything, but hopefully it's something the developers are aware of and can address. But anyways, I like you stated, I'll probably keep poking at this for the next long while, because it seems like it's quite a beefy game. Like I'm 20 hours in and I'm almost done with the second region. My understanding is that there's 6 regions, so do some math. I'm gonna guess it's like a 60-hour game minimum. Well, I won't say minimum, but like there's certain people who are like, I've already had 300 hours in this game from early access. I'm like, well, so long game, which depending on how thorough you are or how much like you like to role play or go slow or take your time, probably incredibly variable how long it takes, but long game regardless. We only have one other game explicitly listed to talk about here at the starting point of our podcast, unless anyone wants to chime in with any surprises. Nope. All right. I don't know how to introduce this one, Josh.
Well, okay, I guess I will introduce it. Okay, how do I serve this up? So back this January, there was a game that people have started slowly been talking about as time has gone on throughout this year. They're like, there's a surprisingly good RPG despite the context of it. So the game that they were talking about is what's it called? Demon's Roots. It is an RPG Maker game that has 18 plus content. It's a very popular on Steam. That's very popular in that circle, in that community these days of just like releasing a lot of RPG Maker games of varying quality that have 18 plus content that sometimes you can get through like a patch on like the publisher's site to like install the quote unquote the good stuff to make it the more complete version.
I thought we were talking about rants for a second.
So, but they said despite this, Demon's Roots is actually like a really good game. I'm like, okay, well, I'm a person that's open minded. That's never really stopped me from playing these kinds of games. If it's a good game and you're saying it's a good game, and like there's a lot of people that can vouch for it, the Steam reviews, I'm like, okay, this is something I want to get around to. But then some people, the true fans, were like, if you really want to appreciate this game, you need to go play the developer's previous game. The developer of this game is Quick Nail Aristocrat, and their previous game is called King Exit, and that was released back like in 2017. It used to be on Steam. It is now longer available on the Steam store. Demon's Roots was published by Kagura Games, and King Exit was published by Paradise Project. Something happened between the developer and the publisher for King Exit. From what the little research that I, did on it, and like there's some sort of disagreement. So the whole thing was basically just called off and delisted, and then like it's just that game's just like been in oblivion. But it's like, okay, well, if I get the Demon's Roots and people are saying you'll get more out of this if you've played this game, I'm like, okay, I am the type of person that's like, okay, I will go play the previous game no matter what if I'm gonna do this properly. And so I had to go, through some roundabout means.
I need some teeing up. What the new game is called? What?
The new game is called Demon's Roots. The previous game is called King Exit.
So Demon's Roots came out this January, but you were playing Demon's Exit, which came out.
I am playing King Exit that came out that originally released in 2017 on Steam. I don't know if it's much older than that, but it was listed on Steam on 2017. But since you can no longer get it on Steam, and I'm just like coming into this game, totally blind, I'm like, all right, where can I get this game? So obviously I had to go through some back channels, let's say, to obtain this game, because you can't really get it anywhere else.
From the famous cut.
So you can't really get the English release anywhere else. You can go through DL's site for the Japanese release, but it doesn't. English, you can.
I'm looking at their catalog. The only thing I know from this publisher, or it's just Saya no Uta. That's the only thing I know from here.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's not the same. Yeah, but that's very
not the same
famous.
kind of genre.
Yeah. So with that out of the way, I am now a little over 10 hours into King Exit. I've been. I don't know why I'm still playing it. How do I say this? I know I've been saying I should go get caught up on Jedi Fall. I replay my Jedi Fallen Order playthrough, or do this, do that to get prepped up for the next few months for these games. And here I am, just fucking IQ is fucking like 0 at this point, playing this game, and it is this English release that I'm playing of this game. It is, I shit you not, it is one of the worst localized things I've ever played in a video game. This might be like top 3 worst localizations ever. It is so hard to fucking read, and every sort of sin you can commit in localization is in this game, whether it's like just awkwardly phrased sentences, whether there's like unlocalized text, whether there's like just like text parsing that can't fit into like text windows. Like I sent Brian a private screenshot, one asking permission to talk about this game, and 2 because I just had to like share with someone what like how some of the text is like fucking in this game. Brian, describe one of the screenshots that I sent you earlier that you were trying to read the text in it.
So the first couple examples that Josh sent me is just bad dialogue where it's just like, why you didn't participate in battle just now, or something like that. But then he sent me a picture of a menu screen showing equipment, and like it shows it's pretty basic. It looks like maybe like a Super Nintendo era RPG because RPG Maker, right? It's like, all right, weapon, shield, head, body, accessory, spiked wooden shield, wooden wand, cursed amulet, and then there's this shield in the inventory that has like 10 words of text crammed into a tiny little text box, and it says in like super narrow, like Arial narrow font, like Arial mega narrow font, dragon scale small shield underscore a small shield made of dragon scale. It's just like, I can't even read it. This looks like a bunch of vertical lines that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do this? Why not just call it dragon scale shield? I don't know. But so like the fact that it's not only just a very rough translation, but just quirky things like that, I appreciate it on some level.
Okay, go for it, Chow.
I was gonna say, the way that you posted those screenshots, I was thinking, is this a Chinese publisher, by the way?
I didn't look into the Paradise Project publisher outside of like the disagreement that they had. I don't know. I don't know anything about them beyond that.
Because nobody uses the line brother a lot unless it's like in Chinese. Like when you're friendly with somebody, they always call you like brother of some kind. They'll be like, "Hey," it's like even my dad know this guy as a friend. They call him like Brother Wei or something like that.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking like, is this like from a Chinese publisher? Because people in China don't really know the idea of good localization. Though this machine translate, I think it works.
And Chow is referencing one of the screenshots that I also posted to Brian that I have now publicly revealed to the panel here. Is like in one of the early sequences for this game, you get introduced to a party member. He's like a black dude. He's bald. He's like kind of like the tank of the group. He's cool. But then like the wizard, the mage, like the way that they phrased it, it's like the first time that you meet it, it's like this mage says, "Black brother, why you didn't participate in the battle just now?" I was just like, it's like
when you said it like that, I was just thinking like in Chinese terms. It'll be like, "Hey," it's like he's probably seeing this guy in a black armor, and he's just trying to be friendly by saying "black brother." If that was in Chinese. That's why it's why I translated this awkwardly.
Yeah, like I guess to properly sum up like the English script, this game, it's like it's worse than machine translated text, modern machine translation. I'd say this is definitely run through like machine translation, like the earlier forms of it, like a decade ago, if not more.
This is like going to a Chinese restaurant in China and you look at the English menu. It'll be like duck on pig something. You'll be like, what the hell is this shit?
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's more along those lines, maybe a tad worse in quality than that. But yeah, I could get the gist of it after like years of like properly training myself to like kind of read these kinds of things. But you would be better off running through like the English script or like a machine translation these days, and you'd probably get a better result. But anyway, I digress on that. And like, so the game is basically the main story in the present time in this game revolves around this prison that Geo Luis is sent to. Geo Luis is this female hero of the humans that it's like the famous war hero from their war with the Asmodeans, which like kind of like the demon kind of in that world, like several decades ago. There's something that happens to her life, like at the very beginning of the game when you start finally controlling Geo Luis. She's like living a peaceful life. She's running an orphanage. She's like friendly with like the local townspeople. Everything's at peace, etc. Then one day, out of nowhere, everything turns to shit. The peace of the kingdom is in shambles because someone frames Geo Luis by sending a letter to her knights, and like basically like her knights are basically the main force of the of security in that kingdom. And like, look, I'm not a fucking storyteller, so I don't know why this makes sense, but I guess in this world this makes sense. they frame her because she sends a letter to all her knights saying, "Go meet me at this place. It's very important. Please, everyone, come meet me at this place." And all her knights and all the security in that kingdom are basically gone from the kingdom that day, which exposes a big security vulnerability. Whatever the conspirators are in that game, I assume they're gonna get to it at the end of the game, like exposing the full truth and whatnot about that incident. They kind of just like go ham on the kingdom, like just basically killing everyone and everything that Geolise has ever loved and built up, all the villagers, all the few remaining security guards, even her orphanage, they burn it down. All the people in it basically die, and they all frame this incident on Geo Louise because apparently she sent that letter. That's how the trial process went. She goes to prison. She's kind of like giving up on life. She's kind of like obviously a lot of things happen over there. So the main objective of the game in the present time is you're Geo Louise. You need to get out of this prison. Why I say that in that manner is because there are some playable segments when she sleeps where you get flashbacks of the war with Asmodeans with her and her party at like several like key moments in that war, kind of giving you more backstory on like what was the war like, what did that entail, what sacrifices were made, what were the Asmodeans doing, what was the toll like physically and mentally on those people back then, like because Asmodeans did like some fucked up shit, like they could brainwash humans. Once a human was brainwashed, they couldn't ever escape from that. So a lot of fucked up shit happens in that, and and that's kind of where you get like your first taste of like the real like art like party gameplay in that game, because you don't get your quote unquote real second party member in the present day until like several hours, like 2 to 3 hours into the game, because there's like a lot of like lead up to that second party member.
My question is, what is the relationship with Demon Roots? Is it the Prius game? Is that it?
Okay, so apparently there's like this game serves as a prequel, and I guess maybe some parts of this are maybe a sequel to Demon's Roots. I don't know exactly sure, but they from what I can call from what I can tell right now, it does share like the same world, because there are some like the sci-fi roots of like or the sci-fi aspects to this King Exit game. Like eventually you'll get a party member that's a basically an isekai party member that like you just find her and she's from another world, and there seems to be like a parallel world aspect to Demon's Roots and King Exit. In King Exit you find it out quite a bit later, while in Demon's Roots it's kind of like one of your party members that's introduced to you from the get-go as like an FBI investigator from another world. It's like, okay, so so there's like the Asmodeans that you learn about in this game. I think they're involved also in Demon's Roots as well. So they do seem to have like commonalities, and they do share the same world. I don't know if Demon's Roots event like references like the events of the King Exit directly or not. That's something for me to find out, I guess, and I get around to it. But people seem to really like Demon's Roots, and I'm like, all right, well, if I'm gonna play this game, people are like, you'll like it more from playing King Exit. I'm like, okay, I'm willing to go through. I'm willing to fucking just turn my brain off, maybe like get it to negative IQ potentially, and just get through this game. And that's not to say that I'm not enjoying it. It's like there are some interesting aspects to this game, like gameplay wise, in terms of like what sort of like functions party members serves. Like for example, you'll eventually get a party member that's like literally like a fucking knight that there's nothing in there. It's kind of like a full suit of armor, but there's like no one inside, and you don't really know what the fuck is up with this deal. What the deal with this armor knight? But he has an ability to like shield everyone from like from attacks. Like he has like a skill that redirects all incoming enemy attacks to him, and he also has the added benefit, or they rather. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but they also have the ability, since there's no one inside. There's no human inside. That they cannot take status ailments. So like anything like paralysis, poison, anything like that would like kind of affect the human body biology, it doesn't apply to them because there's no one inside. So it has interesting mechanics around that, like that, but they're like kind of weak to magical attacks. You have to kind of think about like the party composition of enemies and see if that's a valid tactic. And then there's like the isekai girl that you get. It has like a really, really powerful like ultimate skill that like kind of it generates so much TP when you use it, and then inflicts the hemorrhage status, which is like basically like a mega bleed.
I was going to ask like in like a concluding remark, like so you've heard that Demon's Roots is surprisingly good. That's really that's it in my comment.
I thought you were going to ask me a question. I'm like,
well, I guess just like you haven't fallen off the wagon yet. So
I mean, I'm here, right? Like I'm basically at the end of the game, so I might as well just finish it.
So it's not that long. Okay.
Yeah. I'm basically, pretty much at the end of like the home stretch. So I'm here, and then eventually I'll get the Demon's Roots, and then I'll become, I don't know, maybe an appreciator, a true fan.
So why did this game got removed besides like age content? I mean, there's age content.
It didn't get removed as age content. It got removed because there's apparently a disagreement between the developer and the previous publisher, because the publisher of Demon's Roots is now Kagura Games, and then the publisher of King Exit back then was Paradise Project. So there's a disagreement between Paradise Project and what was the name of the developer again? It was Picknail Aristocrat. There was a disagreement between them apparently, which basically got it delisted from Steam, and that was like only the official English release of that game. So there's basically no legal way to obtain the English version of King Exit, because Steam was like the only storefront that sold it and had it. Fuck it, I don't know.
Well, thank you, Josh, for giving us a look in on your journey into RPG Maker games on Steam.
I don't know how I feel about like having this like be on the public record forever, but fuck it.
And with that, I don't know any way to elegantly go into topic shoutouts. Hooray!
We do. We talk about Advance Wars.
Well, I mean, I was going to mention that, of course, we have a few features up on the site, so we'll go ahead and go through the feature shoutouts before we go into the news. And one of those is that Paul did put up a review for the finally released Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. Obviously, it was originally intended to release like a year ago, just now is releasing this week. Has anyone else dove into this game? In addition to Paul?
I into the original. I heard that the Switch version, there's one issue. You cannot play the second game unless you beat the first game.
I heard that wasn't true. Like I heard some people say that, but then I heard some people push back against that. I haven't played it myself, but like I did hear that you can't play Advance Wars 2 without playing 1 in Reboot Camp.
Yeah, you had to beat 1 before you could beat 2, or before you could play 2. Apparently, that's from one of our mutuals and staff said. Because the last mission was actually very hard. Because the last boss has this ridiculous ability that makes it very hard to beat him unless you're pretty good at the game. So
CD said you couldn't, but then Paul said you could.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That it was it was kind of up in the air. So obviously, we won't make a declarative statement here. But I will say that Paul's review, he thought pretty highly of it. I don't know if he had played the game before or not, but we have that up on the site as well. And I played a little bit of Advance Wars 1 back on the GBA, and I didn't really click with it, so I never really kept with the series. So I kind of have just limited interest in Reboot Camp, but maybe I'll poke at it before the end of the year if I find space. But I didn't quite like the unit summoning mechanics of how it worked in the original game. But obviously, independent of my opinion, it's always nice to have the series revisited in a modern format that can be, accessible to a lot of people who do really love the series, including newcomers like Paul, who thought pretty highly of the game. And we have that review up on the site. In addition to the Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp review, we did put up a formal official review for Atelier Ryza 3. We won't dwell on this too long because, of course, James has already previously provided his thoughts on Ryza 3. However, I do just want to make sure I give it its due. Nathan, who got kind of a late code, and also it's a game that is very long, was able to finalize and put up his review of Atelier Ryza 3. And Nathan thought very, very highly of the game. He scored it a 9. He did call out the open world nature of the game with its very large explorable areas. He really did enjoy a lot. So for a very positive review on Ryza 3, we have that up on the site from from Nathan, in addition to, of course, our previous podcast discussions on the game held by James. James also has at least one feature up on the site. He's usually good for 1 or 2 features a week that he puts up about games that he's played throughout the year. He put up a feature for a game that came out a couple months ago that both he and I played a fair bit of, and that's, of course, Wild Hearts. So we've discussed this game back when it released in February. You did put up an article basically about like Wild Hearts 2 months later, effectively. Do you have any like comments that you want to put here about 2 months in, how you feel about Wild Hearts, about its technical issues, about the small bits of content that they've added to the game?
Yeah, so basically with my original review, and I have updated the score because of
I didn't know
patches
that.
and whatnot. With the original review, I noted that I liked the game. I thought it was really, really good, but a combination of some severe graphical issues with like AMD RDNA and A3 cards that was not fixed before launch, and was, to be blunt, like very, very like concerning for anyone with like epilepsy or whatnot. And 2, like just overall poor performance across the board. I ended up giving it a 7.
Yeah, Wild Hearts was kind of our centerpiece of poor PC ports of the spring era, or late fall, early spring.
Well, it wasn't even so much the PC port itself, because from what I understand, the performance on consoles wasn't much better. But yeah, it wasn't in a good state. But 2 months in, it's still not perfect, but performance has slowly and steadily improved. And like there's been bug fixes. We no longer have those like flashing lights. There's more content now. Like the game already had a decent, I'd say, end game loop, but especially now it feels like it's kind of like grown into its shoes, so to speak. There's like more monsters to fight. There's more more kimono, I should say, more volatile kimono that keeps getting new content, whatnot. Like the most recent patch that came out after this post was serial hunts, so you can hunt like a bunch of different kimonos in sequence or something like that. Anyways, it's in a much better state. It's at the point now where if I know that you have a strong enough PC, I could recommend it. It's still not perfect, but I have bumped the score from 7 to an 8.
And I know one thing.
I played a little bit of that too. I got it the last week or something, and I played a good chunk, like a good chunk of the very first, like, you know, I barely beat King Tusk, so like I played a good chunk of it. But you know, Wild Hearts, another game that I've delayed due to, you know, just much better games, you know.
Hey, I mean, you're not wrong, but I know one thing that James called out in his update feature here is that you kind of do give credit to EA for the crossplay capabilities of this game, because that's something that other series have not incorporated. But I'll put it this way, have you played this game with the updates in the last couple of months in co-op to kind of experience that yourself? Because I know when the review was written, it was pre-release, so co-op was a little bit dicey.
Oh yeah, like to be clear, like the main reason I wrote this up is I like returned to Wild Hearts for like a couple of days and played a good number of hours, and like seeing that the multiplayer was still completely active 2 months in, even though the game itself kind of had like a bit of a rough start. It's like that would not be the case. I am like certain it would not be the case if it wasn't for crossplay. I'm like convinced that the game would have dropped off a cliff if there wasn't that crossplay built in.
I will say that I played the game. I haven't touched it with the updates, though. I've kept both Wild Hearts and Monster Hunter Rise installed because I endeavor to one day get back to them for the updates. But I will say that when I was playing through Wild Hearts back in February, early March, the boss that I struggled with the most was Amaterasu, who in this game is like a large like phoenix/peacock type creature. That game, or that boss, like I played through in co-op several times to get materials, and like there is a community in this game, and like you can get co-op fights, at least at the time, and sounds like continuing to this day, like a pretty healthy community for that game, and it is a lot of fun in co-op. So I just want to echo your statements to the extent that I can. having not revisited the game since launch. So it's really heartening to hear that that's still the case.
Yep. I really do hope that the performance continues to get improved, because I do think like this might be a bit of a hot take. I think if it wasn't for the technical issues, I probably enjoy Wild Hearts more than Monster Hunter Rise.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, oh man, I still really feel bad for this game, because I think with the proper first impressions, if actually like launched in a really good state off the bat, it would have had like, it feels like it really would have a much bigger community than it currently does.
Yeah. If it had been delayed by like, you can tell like based off the original release time frame that it was like, oh no, we need to get it out before the end of the fiscal year or whatnot or something like that. And then if it had been delayed, maybe the current state wouldn't have been quite enough. It would have been a lot better, but maybe it wouldn't have been enough. But if it had been delayed until like next month or June or something like that, I think it would have been in a much better state. Not just for the fact that it would be like ideally more polished, but also this releasing in February, hot off of Monster Hunter Rise on PlayStation and Xbox, maybe wasn't the best move. Might have been better to give it a bit more space.
I don't know if I enjoyed Wild Hearts more than Rise, like inherently or intrinsically, but I think the main thing that the reason why I haven't stuck to Rise as much as I did to World, because World I ended up putting like 800 hours in. Rise I think I'm barely over 100, which is still a lot, but I've not like stuck to it as much, and that's just because it was too familiar. Where Wild Hearts, I just appreciated the things that it does differently, especially with the Karakuri and the small building mechanic. So I think I've enjoyed Wild Hearts more than Rise simply for the novelty of it and the fact that the systems underneath are really engaging and really fun.
It really makes me miss when like there were other spin-off of Monster Hunters, like especially on on handheld, like on PSP and Vita. Like when they tried like different stuff to make them like their own, craft their own identity. Like I think about Freedom Wars and Soul Sacrifice.
I feel bad for like Omega Force here a bit, because I feel like it's kind of like a similar situation with like Tokyo 2. That game was legitimately really, really good, but it didn't do super hot, and then it didn't get like an expansion or anything like that. I think if Tokyo 2 had gotten an expansion, you would have seen a lot more people these days like talking about how good that game was.
Yeah, it's definitely because like those games came out before Monster Hunter World, and now because of Monster Hunter World, like that Monster Hunter formula is like very popular again.
Yeah.
So it's just like, if you like imagine if like those games like got like one more like definitive release and like got polished up and were put on modern platform. Like I think that like the resurgence in that would be like, it'd be pretty glorious, because now that like people have a craving on that Monster Hunter formula, and I think a lot of people would appreciate like the ways that they varied that up.
Yeah, I will say that apparently Wild Hearts did at least chart in, I wanted to say NPD, it's Circana now, I think. So at least in the US, it's done well, I don't know what their expectations were, but it seems like it hasn't done as poorly as maybe folks were thinking. I don't know.
It depends on EA's expectations. It's hard to say.
Oh, this was like 100% a AAA game, so it's like you gotta expect that they probably want to sell like 10 million ideally.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that like maybe like the number seems high to us, but for EA is like, I don't know.
How dare the game only sell 3 million? And for what it's worth, I don't know if we've ever got an official sales update for Wild Hearts, but basically, you never know quite, based on we cover such a wide genre of games here, where it's like there's some series, if they hit 500,000, we are celebrating in the streets, and then there's some series where it's like, I know a lot of people have been having some like concern. I say concern in very, very big air quotes about Final Fantasy 16 pre-orders relative to 15, things like that. Like obviously there's always different scales based on the series, the publisher, etc. What was EA's expectations for Wild Hearts? I don't think we have any idea.
This game probably got greenlit when EA saw that Monster Hunter World sold 20 million copies.
Yes. We live in a post Monster Hunter world.
Yeah.
And more on Monster Hunter later in a kind of surprising fashion. And the last feature I do want to call out before we go into the main news is that, of course, in earlier this month, one of the bigger releases for the site is that the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters have finally, expectedly, made their way to console. So they are now available on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch. Of course, our site Switch specialist, Cullen Black, made sure to cover these remasters on Switch. To no surprise to anyone, he is enjoying the fact that he can play Final Fantasies 1 through 6 on Switch quite a lot. However, he has stated that he has put up a feature on the site that basically is celebrating the release on Switch, but with a surprising kind of caveat that there are some still kind of like performance issues that are a little bit unexpected, specifically with like scrolling and hitching. When I was reading through Cullen's preview of the Pixel remasters on Switch, I was a little bit surprised to read that. Like, oh, I didn't realize that this was a thing, but I guess it is, that these things kind of have a few performance issues. Not major ones.
On PC, these games kind of also have these issues, but you can sort of strong arm your way through it if you have a strong enough PC and you're running it at high frame rates for this, where the stuttering isn't so obvious. But on a Switch, you can't do that. So in some ways, it's almost worse. I'm just taking his word for it based on what he was telling me.
And it didn't seem to affect Cullen's enjoyment at all.
The way that he phrased this article of his was, the remasters, or these Pixel remasters, aren't perfect, but he's thrilled to be playing them. So he's like really happy with the games, like overall, just basically admitting there are some issues here and there. And some people really took some big offense to that. And like, I don't know, did you want him to say these are perfect? Like, they're not perfect. And I think it would have been foolish to try to claim or aim for the fact to make them perfect, because everyone wants something different, right? He was just saying like the font is still a little bit weird. There's still some performance issues. He said he personally didn't care too much about the extra content, but also just kind of like, why not have it, sort of thing.
I think the only extra content I like is probably the FF5 extra content. There was just some cups and stuff.
I like the FF2 extra content, but that's it. It's all very personal.
Of course, that's the tried and true conversation from before about how these Pixel remasters do not include the additions of the games as they released on GBA or DS. So obviously some of these games like Final Fantasy 1 and 2 have had several editions that are represented here in the Pixel remaster, but they don't have like the extra post game stuff, specifically from the GBA versions.
And there's a lot of people who like replied to the article basically saying like they clearly didn't read the article. They're just replying to the tweet, basically saying like the extra content is trash. How could you really want it? And Cullen literally said in his article, like, I don't care too much about this stuff, but if you did, they're not here. That's basically all he said. Yeah. So clearly people weren't actually reading.
That's how
big surprise. People don't read articles.
Yeah, that's how this world is. They don't care about what's in the article. They just read the headline, then look at your review scores. It's like, why did you give this game a trash score? Well, I said it why in the review. But they don't read that, so
I guess I appreciate people being forthcoming. It's like, I don't really read reviews. I just scroll down for the score. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, well, I guess you're honest. Thanks.
Well, to be honest, I don't read people's reviews either. I just ask.
Thanks, Chow. Thank you for your honesty.
This is all Cullen said about the extra content. This is it. Lastly, these versions of the games do still lack the bonus content that they received in the GBA releases. Some might feel this makes these far from definitive, and I think that's a fair assessment. These seek to preserve the original versions of the games on offer, but I do think if there was a time to add that content back in, it would be now. I personally do not miss that content, as I'm not one to care for doing post-game challenges, but I get the sentiment. That's it.
He's doing you a favor, Chow. He's reading it to you out loud because you're not reading it yourself.
Well, this is why I couldn't get the passing grade.
But yeah, of course, those are out on the other consoles now. They've included the like EXP multiplier, and that hasn't been backported yet to the PC version, right?
No. I also heard that you can replace the font too. You can just download the font, just paste it on your SD card, and Boom, done.
That's pretty sick, actually.
So these new releases do have an updated font, as quote unquote RPG site reported a few months back. But apparently, like the new updated English font is still to a lot of people. But people have already managed.
Fix nothing.
Okay, can you imagine how much shit we would have gotten if they didn't update the font?
Wow.
Oh man.
Will be known as fake news site.
Well, we know who we'd curse to, who we would never let it live down. But
I have a pro tip for everybody: when you're playing Final Fantasy VI, make sure you put on that 4x EXP multiplier right away and grind a bunch.
No, that's not the way to play it. What an idiot knows
Absolutely.
All right, and with that, we will go into the news section. This news section is quite light this week, but I forgot to tease this major headline, the first thing we're going to talk about today. I can't believe I forgot to tease this one, and this was kind of a surprise, and that is that this upcoming week, we will get the final DLC for the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 expansion pass. We expected to have a Torna-like expansion content at some point before the end of the year. However, it was announced by Nintendo that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed will launch on April 25th. So within a week, and alongside released
3 days of this podcast recording.
Yeah, we're recording this on the 22nd. By the time you're listening to this might already be out. So the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 final DLC, at least ostensibly the final one, we will be talking about playing it literally next week, which I think is earlier than anyone expected. Just the cadence of this DLC has just kind of been really quite quick. And I don't think
but like we were in like full Zelda mode. Like they had the Zelda gameplay demonstration, they had the Zelda final trailer. It's coming out in like 2 or 3 weeks.
I'm more hyped.
I personally was just expecting like Nintendo's going to be, Advance Wars is out. That was a Nintendo game. We're all in on Zelda. Like I didn't expect to hear anything about Xenoblade 3 until after Zelda was out. I thought we were in like full Zelda mode, and then all of a sudden, nope, this will be out 2 weeks before Zelda.
It's also caught us off guard because we thought this would be like coming out like around the Torna time frame. So we thought it'd be like later this year, kind of like Torna was, and like it's kind of catching me off guard, like how quick some of like the DLC is coming out for some of these recent. Nintendo, like Fire Emblem.
I played the Fire Emblem DLC this last week. It's not very good.
I don't think anyone liked that DLC, to be honest.
But it's just like, okay, I guess that's it for the Fire Emblem DLC.
Yeah, it's less about the quality and more like, wow, these things are just coming out fast, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to delve into. This is crazy what they revealed about this DLC.
So what are you gonna do, Josh? This comes out the day before Honkai Star Rail.
Well, let's let Brian describe what we saw.
So obviously we have a 3-minute trailer detailing this DLC, and there is a lot in it. And I've watched the trailer about 3 times. I know certain people, like mega fans, have probably combed through this trailer to an extent that I don't have the patience for. But so this trailer introduces something like 6 characters, some of which we expected and some of which we didn't. Of course, we kind of already anticipated based on the initial teaser. So we got a little bit of a teaser when the Wave 3 DLC released, that we have kind of adult versions of Shulk and Rex in this trailer. We have a lot of insinuation about Alvis's position as some sort of antagonist. There is some footage of this trailer that is showcasing combat against fog creatures, which is a tie back to Xenoblade Definitive Edition Future Connected, which is something I don't know if we expected to see here, because in Future Connected, those that played that, like the final antagonist there, I guess this kind of goes without saying, and I'll make sure that that this is timestamped. There are going to be kind of general open spoilers here. I'm not going to deliberately talk about how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 ends, but this is kind of something where a lot of this discussion kind of...
It's hard to talk about without talking about like open spoilers for all 3.
This suggests that you have already played Xenoblade Chronicles 3, right? So
1, 2, and 3, to be honest.
Yeah. So I remember when Future Connected came out and the antagonist was kind of like this nebulous fog beast. Is like, what is this? I remember some people were like disappointed, like that it didn't. When Future Connected released, I remember there's certain people that wanted it to tie together 1 and 2, and it really didn't do that. However, it looks like we had Future Connected, and now we have Future Redeemed here for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which seems to be doing what people were hoping that would do.
This is really funny, right? Because when Future Connected came out, we're like, oh, it's gonna tie back into 3, like 3, the main game,
or at least 1 and 2 together. But it didn't really do that. But now we have this, which literally just features Shulk and Rex. I almost, for some reason, I keep wanting to say Shulk and Ryan. I'm like, no, Ryan, unfortunately, is not here. But
Ryan
Shulk
is
and
a
Rex.
family man now.
Yeah, but we have an adult Shulk, we have an adult Rex. The main protagonist here, we had identified him during the teaser, and we thought like it's a character with dark hair and a ponytail. Like, is this some version of Noah? But no, his name is Matthew. We see in this trailer for Future Redeemed that he is pitted against the antagonist N, due to N killing Matthew's grandpa. He calls him granddad. We are introduced to a few other characters. I'm not going to go through them all here, but another major character of this DLC is Niall, who is Matthew's sister, who is somehow pitted also against N. And this is seemingly set before the events of Xenoblade 3, based on the characters present and the
and this is kind of what we predicted,
based on the history of the city in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, interestingly enough, the character that is very clearly Elvis has not been definitively declared to be named Elvis. He is named an unnamed character who Shulk recognizes, though it's clearly Elvis. And then there is a there is a lot of footage that shows the 3. My brain goes to Zohar. What do they call it in this universe?
The Trinity processors.
Yeah, the 3 Trinity processors, the 3 Aegises, whatever they're called, Elvis being one of them. This really does just seem to be the game that this seems like this could be the packet of DLC that ties everything together in a way that I think a subset of the community has wanted for a long time.
But believe me, when I saw the trailer, I saw all 3 Trinity processors slotted together. I'm like, okay, my mind started like sparkling. I was like, okay, I need this. I'm listening now to this trailer.
And of course, there's a small like 3-second clip of the thing that tied Xenoblade 1 and 2 originally together with Klaus on the station, so that's going to factor in some place. So there are certain things that we could speculate endlessly on this, but it's surprising that it's so soon. It almost feels a little bit pointless to speculate because in a week we will know, right?
Yeah, in a way, like it's great that it's coming out so soon, but it's still a lot to take in, right? Like you have a character member, new character party members just named A. Wait, A has a Monado with them? What the fuck? And they can use visions in battle? What the fuck?
Okay. And if I remember right, Xenoblade 3, every console letter had a representative except console A, which I don't know if that plays into this at all.
Who knows?
I do want to shout out what Josh is doing there. It seems like for specifically every like Nintendo account referring to them is specifically avoiding using gendered pronouns, so it might be another non-binary rep.
Yeah, we don't know.
Which we did also kind of see with Juniper. What was it? Yeah, so that was neat to see.
Yeah, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what comes out of it. Of course, the real star of this new batch of characters that introduced is Glimmer. Very much hinting at, this could be the kid that that Rex and Pyra's kid. Very much has the same Trinity processor placement as Pyra had. Very much looks a lot like her, and that's kind of
and same voice actress too.
I know, yeah.
I think that's the voice actress, right?
So that's kind of the character that like everyone's been raving about too, because like it's actually yet to be revealed whether we'll actually see Pyra and Mithra in person. We see the weaponized force that Rex is dual wielding, obviously, but we don't actually know if we're gonna like see them in person. And like I would love to see them in person just for the bickering between Pyra and Glimmer. Just a mother and daughter, a good mother and daughter bickering to each other.
Well,
But-
speaking of, apparently this is
Mhm.
not something I follow, but some people might. Apparently, like finally, like the Pyromithra amiibo is now like available to like order or get or something. Like all right.
Probably spelled out in Taiwan.
Yeah. I'm sure if you're hearing this for the first time, you're already too late. But I didn't realize people were still waiting on those. I thought they had released a while ago, but I guess not. But I know that was kind of accompanying a lot of this.
I have something better. I have the Good Smile Company one.
You have like the $200 ones.
Yeah.
So
I have a kind of a broader topic here.
Sure.
Just like, so this is coming out next week. Zelda is coming out in like 3 weeks. What does Nintendo have after that?
Pikmin 4.
Yeah, Pikmin 4 and Metroid Prime 4, and I think that's it in terms of known quantity things.
That's it. No, that's the end of Nintendo's line. No more Nintendo games after it.
Nintendo,
Okay.
even in their most like, this is weird, and I've seen a lot of people kind of comment on this. Nintendo's had some dry years before, but this is the first time we've specifically had. But even in their dry years, they've always saved some big game for holiday. This is the first year, who knows how long, where the first half of the year is stacked for Nintendo games, and we have no idea at all what's going to be coming in the holiday. Personally, I think it might actually be Metroid Prime 4, but I'm curious, like, what the hell we're going to see.
And I know some people have predicted, like, well, perfect time to announce a Switch 2.
Yep.
Well, the thing is, people have been predicting that for years. Like, this would be the perfect time to Xenoblade would be the perfect time to announce Switch.
Eventually, they'll be right? So it's okay
yeah.
when they eventually announce a follow up to the Switch. Like people are like, yes, we're finally right after guessing it for the 800th time. We're finally right.
I still subscribe to the idea that the Switch OLED was originally going to be a Pro, but because of the silicon shortage and COVID, it just became the Switch OLED.
Now, Nintendo has been pretty good recently about, like, they announce a game and then they release it, like, not that far later. Like, I think Fire Emblem Engage, when was that announced? Like
October
September?
or something like that. Yeah, like it was announced 4 months before it came out. And
Xenoblade 3 was announced in like January and released in July or something like that. So
well, I even remember. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I was gonna say the only real bad ones were the ones really affected, like either by COVID, like Zelda, or like real life world events like Advance Wars.
I think
those are the only really bad ones.
Or Metroid Prime 4, which is just
once again like development hell. Like especially, I assume COVID also impacted that as well.
Well, even like some deep cuts. Like I remember way back when Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was released, people were like, "That's not going to make this year," and then it did. So they announced that like within the year it released. Even on some smaller titles, like I remember, what year did it come out? 2019. Origami King was announced a few months within it coming out.
Announced in May and released in July or something.
Yeah, so I would not be surprised if we have some summer adjacent Nintendo event where they're like, by the way, we've got a Star Fox game or something like that, where they're just like,
F-Zero.
Here it is. Yeah.
Don't say that. People are gonna.
I would not put money on that, but I would say that I am. We have seen this from Nintendo before, and compared to all the other publishers, I would not be surprised if they've got something where like, we're going to announce a thing and it's out in 2 months, because they do that constantly.
I mean, I assume like whatever their showcase is going to be like around the June timeframe where originally E3 would be. They assume they'll put out the roadmap for the rest of the year. I assume it'll be a big one, like because there's a lot of gaps in the year, that they have to fill in.
And they could just at any time say Metroid Prime 2 remaster. Here it is. Just
yeah,
like the first one.
Right.
Yeah, I'm still kind of surprised that wasn't a trilogy remaster, but that allows them to do that.
But yeah, there's also a lot of man, I keep on looking at the Xenoblade 3 DLC news, and did you see that little relationship chart that they put out on the site? I
didn't really look at it. I just saw that it was there.
Yeah. I mean, like you don't have to read too much into it, but you just saw at the bottom right corner, you just see Riku there, and just like it doesn't link it to anyone. He's just like kind of there. He's like, "Yep, that's Riku, all right."
And it's not called the same exact thing, but it does seem like, for better or worse, community is there.
Yay!
Yeah, I do know that the Xenoblade like Japanese official Twitter has been sharing some really short clips, and I haven't gone through those with a fine-tooth comb.
I mean, like you said, in 3 days we're just gonna be playing it. So
Yeah. Hooray.
A big new release next week. Just out of I forgot. Are they going to release it physically separately, like Torna, or
They
no?
haven't said anything yet.
It doesn't seem like it.
I really wonder what the length is going to be like compared to Torna.
In equally exciting news, we have an announcement this week, and that is that Niantic and Capcom are partnering to release Monster Hunter Now for September 2023. For those that are into the Pokemon Go style game, you can now do that and hunt down your favorite Monster Hunter monsters with an open beta announced for April. Or sorry, closed beta. Closed beta announced for later in April.
I'll play this.
I don't know if I'm interested to hear people who are playing it, what they have to say about it, and I don't know if I'll actually play it myself because I've never none of those kinds of games like really.
I used to play Pokemon Go a lot. I really liked it, like back before the pandemic. I've been looking for an excuse to get back into it, but it feels like it's been so long since I last played Pokemon Go, where it's like, I'm not sure if I want to hop back in.
There seems to be like actual like gameplay to this. I wondered like how involved it is, like how well the controls are.
Yeah.
I really like that like you can seamlessly play it between horizontal and vertical alignment on your phone.
I will say, and I guess this is just like kind of like an open question to the call. Like even back when I like kind of last played Pokemon Go, it was like there's a lot of actual gameplay in that game now. Like when was the last time you guys have touched it? Because like everyone's played Pokemon Go at least 17.
Once. When it came out.
I don't know. I don't know if I installed it actually. I saw people. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I installed it.
my brother installed it, and he basically made me drive all over these places to get those.
Okay. I am by no means a Pokemon Go expert, but I've definitely seen like impressions from people that very clearly only touched Pokemon Go at launch and have not touched it since. That game is like drastically different from how it used to be. There is so much actual gameplay.
I've definitely seen like like not recent footage, but like like within the last like year and a half, like I've seen like people like talk about it.
Like issues with Niantic aside, I'd say that that's probably the best mobile game out there. Probably.
And it's had the staying power and it's made a shit ton of money. So I'm not surprised to see.
I heard there was constant improvements to it. So
yeah, and it's like the one main issue that's like kind of like plaguing the game right now is that during COVID they introduced like remote raiding. Because before it used to be that if you wanted to go to a raid, you had to actually go in person. It was like a whole thing about, you need to like gather up in groups because it's like an AR game and all that. COVID obviously made that harder. So they introduced remote raids and they said there was going to be temporary. And they've kept delaying, like pushing back things to how they were. And obviously a lot of people started playing the game when remote raids were like part of the, like, were introduced. So now you have people that have gotten used to fundamentally what the game was never really intended to be. And also, obviously, people that just would not have been able to play if it wasn't for remote raids. And it's just a bit of a mess.
Is it overly honest for me to look at? So the trailer for this Monster Hunter Now starts with like someone walking outside, like Pokemon Go was like originally marketed. I'm like, do I have to go outside? Is that overly honest? Can I just play this at my desk? Because I can see myself poking this.
I mean, that's the thing, and I do want to be clear. I am talking from the standpoint of someone that lives in a major city with plenty of Pokestops and plenty of gyms, which will transfer over to whatever the Monster Hunter equivalent is. Even more bluntly, I could load up Pokemon Go right now on my phone. There was a Pokestop within my desk where I do my work.
Okay, but like Pokemon Go aside, like what else have they revealed about this Monster Hunter now? All I know is like they showed off some footage of like dodge rolling, the tail severing, and that you can play it like you can switch between landscape and portrait seamlessly in it, which is I always find really cool. Like this is not the first game that's done that. There's been other games that have done that. I always appreciate that like they do that.
Yeah, they haven't revealed too much yet, but granted, in a few days, the closed beta starts, so people have more information about that then. So
Yeah,
They revealed that they were going to get their.
if I hear enough good stuff about it, and like people like start getting into it, like maybe I will do it.
This is going to be weird. This is going to be weird. Do we have a Niantic contact we could like reach out to for getting beta access? Because I do have experience with Pokemon Go. Like I haven't played in a while, but there was like a period of like a couple of months where I was playing that game every day. So I would genuinely be interested in like covering this.
They have revealed that they're going to get their mileage out of those Monster Hunter World animations.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, obviously closed beta before the end of the month. So it seems like James might be willing to poke at it. And I know it's a little bit silly, even the way that I introduced it, but it does make sense. Of course, people are going to try to chase that because of the success of Pokemon Go. And Monster Hunter seems like a somewhat, I don't know about a natural fit, but it's an understandable fit. So we'll see if this is a success for Niantic and Capcom or otherwise.
I can't believe James and I will have to like go to the beach to go do the Lagactrius or whatever raid for that game.
Imagine you're hunting a Rathalos and it's like goes Gen 1 mode and it's like, haha, you need to run to the other side of the city to catch me.
Okay, that he fucked up.
This is the James and Josh's anime filler arc.
All right, they brought back paintballs too for this game.
Yeah, I'll be honest.
Fuck.
Oh right, Brian doesn't know what paintballs are.
Oh,
no, I'm aware of generally how they were, but yes, I came back. I do like the idea of James like reporting in. It's like, so I traveled to Colorado, and I caught I happened to run into a Sharish Volda or whatever. Like,
all right, Brian. Back in the old days, when a monster ran away, the map didn't automatically show you where it went. Okay,
so you either had to trace like the shadow that it cast and like look at where it was going to be like, okay, here's the zones I know it can be in, and this is the direction it went, so I can check this zone. Or if you're smart, you either bring psycho serums, which you can drink and it just telepathically lets you know which zone it's in, or you just throw a paintball at it.
Or
the really fun stuff is that if you see a hot air balloon, that's like a research expedition, and if you like look at it with your camera and then use the wave emote, it'll like send a signal back to let you know, like in Morse code, which area it's in.
Well, why not just use your scout flies, guys? Come on.
Oh, Brian, back in the old days, there was this thing called open zone gameplay in Montreal.
Back in the old days, you didn't just find a gathering point. The game didn't let you know so graciously you were on top of a gathering point. You see a beehive, and you just stand under it. It doesn't let you know you can gather there. You just press the button, and then you gather there.
Oh my god, will Monster Hunter now have gathering resources? Like, you have to fucking go to this thing, go to this flower shop.
That's what Pokestops will be in Monster Hunter now. You'll get that for your supplies that you use when you're hunting monsters. Like, I genuinely think this is a really good fit for the type of game that, like,
I'm really interested to hear like more mechanics about it. Like, I'm like, it's genuinely like an interesting idea to me because I like that idea.
The last major headline I have here, or that I've binned with the major headlines before we get into just some other gameplay trailers, is that Square Enix released a trailer this week that had an interesting premise and an interesting headline. It was called the Square Enix AI Tech Preview for a game called the Portopia Serial Murder Case. And this was something that kind of, as far as I understand, didn't quite come out of no. Yeah, so this is an adventure game that came out in 1983, but of course that headline is, I won't say it's inherently incendiary, but anything of course with and around the realm of AI today is a hot topic for various reasons that I'm not going to dive into here, especially around the world of gaming, especially from Square Enix, who has kind of latched on to certain trends in certain ways that has been kind of undesirable, like with their focus on Web3 and NFTs and things like that. So there was a lot of knee-jerk reactions when they said, "Hey, here's an AI tech preview." Like, what are you doing, Square Enix? However, watching this demo that they've shown for kind of a reimagining of this 1983 adventure game called the Portopia Serial Murder Case to kind of demonstrate how AI can be used in their games, I thought when I watched this and tried to keep as open of a mind as possible, I was quite I don't know about enamored, but I was quite engaged with what they were showing here. So this is an adventure game that is going to have some sort of demo or re-release or remake on Steam this week on April 23rd, where they are using AI capability to have a smart dialogue integration in this adventure game where you'll have characters speaking to you, and instead of choosing from a list of responses from your character's perspective, you would literally type in a response, which is then understood by the software what you intend. Like this is a game where obviously I've not played the original, but based on the trailer that they've shown, involves investigative measures. You're in the role of something in the guise of a detective or something like that, where you would type in, investigate this character, show this piece of evidence, look at this photo. So you type these in, and the game and the NPC that's speaking to you will understand what you mean based on well, at least that's what Square Enix is trying to demonstrate here.
A lot of like a lot of this is cleared up. Like there's like if anything, there's like the one game you should really read about this software description on the Steam page, because it clears up anything, like any uncertainties like people may have about this whole thing, because it's mainly like this whole reimagining the Portopia Serial Murder Case is used to enhance the natural language processing technology that is commonly used globally. It is.
Let me just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like if they would have called it an NLP tech demo, which is natural language processing, rather than an AI tech demo, maybe the initial like response that some people had when they see like that visceral response and they see AI might have been mitigated a bit if they just called it an NLP demo instead.
I agree.
I will say though that it's a little awkward talking about this when just an hour ago the official Nier account tweeted out a text with put out a tweet with a disclaimer saying that the text was drafted by ChatGPT.
I mean, that's a fucking Nier Twitter account. They shit post on a daily basis. So
yeah, that's what they do.
I mean, who cares? To be honest,
this game is more in line with what the original creator's vision is.
The original creator was one Yuji Horii.
Dragon Quest. This game inspired a lot of other games, like for example, Famicom Detective Club. Yep. You know, he played this game when he was a kid, and you're like, oh man, I want to make video games now, and Famicom Detective Club was a byproduct of that.
And to be clear, like Yuji Horii, like alone made the original release of this game in Japan. The original release was like for the PC 8801, and it was published by Enix. And that was the version of the game that was where you put in you typed in pre-canned phrases that the game would recognize in Japanese to navigate through that game. There was an updated remake of that game on Famicom that did away with the text parser and like gave you the more traditional menu-based decision making. So like instead of like having to type out stuff, you have a list of options to choose from in the Famicom release that did get a English fan translation. And that was the one that was very popular among the mainstream, and that really that's the version that really like exploded the adventure genre. Like it was like mind blowing at that time. It's hard to like even describe like the impact of that game because it affected so much, but it's interesting to see that like the reimagining and remake of this game is like more true to the original release. So according to the Steam page, it's only going to support English and Japanese, but but it's definitely understandable and more interesting to me to see that like they're using NLP as a way to like as like the main like thrust to like engage with this game because of like of the improvements to that to technology in general over the years. It's and going to be interesting to see how an experiment how flexible it is in like in the confines and framework of the game. It also supports speech to text, so I really want to test out too, like how well the speech to text technology can like pick up and like identify what you're saying and put that into text at the game and how they process what you're saying when you're just trying to like have like when you're saying stuff like in a more natural conversation in the way that you're structuring your sentences, like will it be versatile and flexible enough to like understand that and be like and proceed on to like what you want it to do instead of like the traditional like choose your own adventure DOS commands where like you had to like basically get a dictionary of like, okay, what will this piece of software, what command phrases will it respond to, and there's the only you had to. It was a very strict like text input of like it will respond to these, it will not respond to anything else. If you're like one letter off, you'll have to redo the command or type out the read. So it's not as flexible, obviously, because technology back then and that time frame was very basic, very not obviously not as advanced as it is today.
Like when I think of natural language, like that's existed before the recent, like obviously we live in the world of ChatGPT and AI art and things like that, but this is what the nerd I am. Back when I was in grad school, there was this online tool called Wolfram Alpha for doing any sort of mathematic plotting or
from Alpha.
Yeah, but the thing is I remember this has got to be over 10 years ago now, but they had a major update that was called something like the natural language update, where you didn't have to have any specific syntax for what you wanted. You could just type into the prompt, graph a blue cone of area 6 cubic feet, height 10 feet or whatever. And it would just do it. Similar-ish to how you would just type in ChatGPT, write a review of Ryza 3 or whatever you would do to but the thing is, so like
away Nathan's strategies here.
No, I mean this is
joking.
that's all. We're all expendable, but that's so like when I think of natural language, like this is something that like has already existed in other forms for a while now, and
AI has already existed before it exploded with like AI art or whatever. So
yeah, so that's so like as kind of irritating as it's been for Square Enix's New Year's resolution to be like, here's what we think about NFTs or whatever. The fact that they're looking at this for this particular case, I have no problem with, and I think it's a very interesting little trial here to see like how they can incorporate user dialogue input in a way.
The interesting thing about this too is like this is going to be a free to play game, and I'm assuming it's going to be a full game. I think ? I have no idea, but
have you beaten the original game, Josh?
I played a chunk of it. I didn't actually get to the ending of it. The
original game is very short. You basically like, based on your findings, you basically determine who your culprit is, and basically you get the ending based on who you think the culprit is. Obviously, there is a true mastermind, but getting the wrong person as the culprit is.
But people have been saying the ending is kind of not infamous, but like it's famous for like I'm what like. But I didn't get to there, so I don't actually know who the true master.
Yeah,
that playthrough was like a lifetime ago. So
yeah. I already know who the true mastermind is. But
I don't know. I guess that's good that I don't know that.
But like people playing the game back in the day, I don't think this game is like beatable without a guide. There's some very obscure shit in this game, like trying to get through the game. It's just like playing Misery back in the day. How you trying to get like the real ending? It's just like very obscure shit. I don't know if that will be in the remake.
Yeah, but to anyone who's like mildly or even a little bit interested in adventure games, I'd say, hey, for free, the prices are free, and then it seems to have a lot of technologies it's testing under the hood. Obviously, if anyone is like still on the fence of like I don't know about like the ethical issues that like may arise from this, I highly recommend visiting the Steam page to this the Portopia Serial Murder Case for this game and like reading the whole entire description, because they go into very much detail, like why exactly they're doing this and like the technologies that they're employing and like the concerns that people might have about it. Like for example, they had to disable the natural language generation aspect of this game because they were receiving unethical replies from the AI generating the responses. They're like, okay, well, we're not going to roll out that feature until we're like, confident that it'll work as intended, and not be fucking weird. Which it's very understandable why people are skeptical about this, but just read a little bit more about like what's under the hood and seeing what they're doing.
And with that, we'll go into our last slate of news posts here. Most of these, like I stated at the top of this podcast, are gameplay trailers for upcoming releases. I believe I have them slotted here kind of in a rough chronological order. Starting with something that is actually already out that I don't know if we have a ton to talk about here, but we've obviously spoken about Monster Hunter and Monster Hunter Rise specifically in a few different contexts, both with the Monster Hunter Now that was announced, and of course with the comparison to Wild Hearts, which has been getting some updates from EA throughout the year since its launch in February. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, of course, launches on consoles at the end of the month on April 28th. And of course, the PC and Switch version of the game continues to see support from Capcom. So Update 5 just released earlier this week, which added new Risen Elder Dragons and also added an Elder Dragon named Amatsu, who I will have to defer to our Monster Hunter experts. Amatsu, is this something that strikes fear in our hearts, or who is this cameo?
Is this something we should be scared of?
Yeah.
Amatsu isn't really a terrifying monster. It's just like they've been leading up to their inclusion in Sunbreak for the last like couple of title updates now, and like between like little bits and bobs on Twitter, like this was expected.
Okay. So yeah, Update 5 just released
Risen for Shigeru Magala, however.
Oh yeah, and that one I can actually speak to a little bit, based on Shigeru Magala in the base game, or in Sunbreak, I mean. So I haven't gotten to like Risen Valstrax yet, so I'm behind on these updates. But Update 5, this is for the Switch and PC version. The Xbox and PlayStation version is going to launch with all the updates up to Title Update 3, so they will be offset for a little bit. I presume eventually, as we've seen with World and Iceborne, that will eventually coincide, but we're a few months out from that. So still plenty of reasons to keep Monster Hunter Rise installed or look forward to Sunbreak's release if you're playing on Xbox or PlayStation. As for gameplay trailers, in a rough chronological order, coming out next month in early May, we have the Switch release of Dokapon Kingdom Connect, which we have talked about during its announcement over the last couple of months in previous podcasts. And Idea Factory did release a 3-minute gameplay trailer. Doesn't have any voiceover or anything. It's pretty much just pure gameplay of what to expect from this game, as a little quirky, make a whole lot of friends puzzle game. Friendships will be tested, I presume, through this title, though I have not played the original release, so I don't know to what extent.
Wait, are you saying Dokapon Kingdom is a puzzle game? What?
Well, no,
it is an RPG.
Yeah,
it's a Mario Party like. That's how I think.
Yeah, it's basically Mario Party except like 10 times longer with a whole ass RPG.
Yeah,
being played out, and you can really fuck over other people, and then make the last like 90 hours mean nothing to them in the last 2 turns. Like
it is the most petty game that you can think of.
It's awesome.
I just like how every single trailer or announcement of this game, like I'm going to this trailer. This is the gameplay trailer. It's called A Schemer's Guide to Dokapon, and the things are like, gotta love how this game encourages friendships to be destroyed, things like that. Like
it is pretty infamous for that. It's like if people are like Mario Party, that people gas up Mario Party for breaking up friendships. It's like, man, nah, you haven't played Dokapon. If you really want to make it feel like you really wasted your friends' time.
So that of course will come out early next month, and we have a new gameplay trailer that shows exactly how it works. And as someone who's not played the game, it does really just seem like, oh yeah, this is Mario Party. So that's my That's my purview as I see it from an outsider's perspective. We also got gameplay trailers for some upcoming RPGs that come out in more of the June timeframe, starting with an Xseed release trailer for Loop 8 Summer of Gods. So this is a game that we've talked about on a few previous podcasts. I believe it was originally announced in a Japanese Nintendo Direct, and slowly we got its official Western marketing through Xseed over the last couple of months. Had a few high-level comparisons to Persona. This week, we got our first extended kind of gameplay deep dive. We have a 7-minute trailer from Xseed about how this game exactly works. And having watched the trailer, I am kind of surprised. I don't know how to state this charitably, but it's a lot more limited than I expected in terms of animation, in terms of how the game is presented. It just seems like a bit of a budget title. That's not necessarily bad, but it wasn't quite what I expected.
It reconfirms what I said about this game in an earlier podcast, and like it in a really not great way. Do you remember the game that I was like referencing when we first saw like footage of it in motion?
Not offhand.
Time and Eternity for the PlayStation 3.
That's a bad sign.
I was like, oh no. Like, what are you doing? Why are you mentioning like I must feel like people who are like, oh, man, I feel like a crazy
that time was basically, I think the PS3 was suffering from RPG droughts, and NISA was offering titles, and that's what you get, or Natural Doctrine, stuff like that. And you're like, oh my god, what are these games?
But like when we saw the new gameplay trailer Loop 8, I'm like, oh my god, it looks a lot like Time and Eternity in motion. Like when you see like the animations. I'm like, oh my god.
Maybe I wasn't paying attention to it back then, because this is the first time I've seen a significant amount of both out of and in combat gameplay of this game in motion. And the main character, Nini, he looks like he's like power walking, but like it's like 10 frames of animation as he like struts down the street. And then when he speaks to other characters, they have like a fine 3D model that's facing him as he speaks, and you choose dialogue options. But instead of animating between poses, they just like phase between poses. Like he's speaking to a friend named Saru who's got like his hands behind his head, and then when he's excited, the image will like phase to him like giving a fist pump. Like it doesn't naturally transition. It just like
it's like a stop motion, like you're flipping through pages, but it's missing some pages to like make it smoother. In the most like charitable way, I'll give it.
And then how this game works is that each character has like 3 different affinity meters between friendship, affection, and hate, which then like based on your choices and your battle outcomes and things like that will determine like their overall feelings towards you and towards each other. Then how the battles work, and maybe this was already detailed in a press release, so this is my first time seeing it in action. You only ever control the input of the main character, and then the inputs of the other character is just suggested, which is not new. Like it's classic Persona work that way. Persona 3,
it's like original Persona 3, like
Persona 3, Persona 3, and Persona 4 pre-Golden. Do I have that right?
No, Persona 3 is the only one that had like Persona 4 lets you even the original let you dictate like party members' actions, and is only the original Persona 3 release that like locked you into.
I forgot.
I prefer that way.
But in Loop 8 Summer of Gods, you choose the actions of the main character, and then the other characters based on not only their affinity towards the main character, but their affinity towards the target that will determine their actions. So this had 2 effects. As I watched this gameplay, I kind of thought of 2 things. First of all, they talked about how using hatred-based actions deal more damage, but also inflict like the enemy will get stronger if you use those, although counterattack more strongly. And I thought that was kind of like, oh, that's an interesting little wrinkle there. Using the strongest abilities you have they come with a risk. So I'm like, all right, that's not nothing. That's something that could be inherently interesting. However, this does seem like a lot of you choose an input and then you watch it play out, and then you choose an input and then you watch it play out, which you could say that's all turn-based games, but to an exaggerated extent here. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Of course, it's just a trailer, but I will say that as I watch this, I'm like, I don't know if I'm interested. Like it's not what I expected, but that's just a personal opinion of mine. So
yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll really have to see it in motion or like see it in action for myself and see how it feels to play. Like I think on paper, it sounds interesting. In execution, the gameplay trailer really didn't do it many favors for me. But I think I need to see like the larger context of it to like. I'm still open to giving it a fair shot.
I kind of been this with like Mato Anomalies, which released a month ago or so without a lot of fanfare. We're like, I'm sure it has a few interesting things under the hood, but our plates are just so full that when the gameplay trailer has us questioning, I'm like, I'm not sure I want to jump on board. And then of course we already know how packed May and June are. So when this is releasing, June 6th. So at a time where it's like, okay, it's a crowded era, so I don't know that I'm going to be able to earmark time for this game, at least during release. So it had to be down the road or see some word of mouth before we jump in. But we do have the gameplay trailer. It is very thorough. If you have any questions about how this game looks or plays, it puts it all out there, as we're a little over a month away from it releasing in June. Another game that we got that is also releasing in June that we got some gameplay footage of is, of course, the Switch and PC release of the Etrian Odyssey Origins collection. Of course, the main difference here is that this is, of course, a remaster collection of a set of DS games. So not only is this trailer just showcasing how the game is translated to its new platforms, but accompanies some details for how these new remasters will utilize the new platforms to hold the original release preserve it as accurately as possible. One thing that Atlas has detailed alongside the gameplay trailer for this remaster collection of the first 3 games is that the Switch will have touchscreen capability, just like to emulate how it was available on the DS, and the PC release will allow for mouse input. And then both of these releases for Switch and PC will include a new auto mapping feature as a quality of life improvement for the.
I'm sorry, but it's just so weird to hear like, oh man, the PC version will have mouse input. That's crazy. Like, you have to understand. That sounds absurd, right?
I mean, not
like that's not like coming from you. It's like from the trailer itself. But it's like yes, that's the basic
It is a marketing point at this point because Wolong, when Wolong first came out, it did not have proper mouse support.
Yeah, God, it's so.
Well, I remember I think it was one of Durante's like deep dives for one of his ports, but like sometimes like mouse input where it just emulates a control selection, like it's not trivial. To make these menus support a cursor input when they weren't originally designed to have that. So I don't think. Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure that's the reason why so many like AAA games have that sort of like menuing where it's like you use the analog stick to move like a cursor to select things, because it makes it easier for them to just get like mouse support for menus on PC.
Sorry,
I agree with you that like mouse input is not sexy, but it's what Atlas called out in their trailer, so I'm going to state it here. You get mouse input on the PC version of Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection. There you go. If you don't like it, then tough.
Okay, that's not really my real beef about this game. Like ever since like the original trailer, it's like I think this is a pixel remaster thing where hopefully people like modern like alternative fonts for this game. I don't really like the fonts in this, but that's me.
They should bring back the original DS, the original games, original version, original font.
There we go. Now we're stopping.
Just spend $300 on eBay and buy the
No,
original.
but I agree. The font is really strange. It has the same problem that the Pixel Masters do, where it's just like really thin in some places, and some of the boxes that like they barely take up space in the box. So you have like a lot of empty space, and then not only that, but there's a couple of places where there's like a font for a name and a font for an item, or a font in a selection and menu, and they don't seem to like match very well.
Yeah.
Is it a dragon small hide shield made from dragon skin or whatever though?
Okay, like okay, Brian. Like I'll admit, it is one of those things that at least I can appreciate every other game right now for not being beyond bottom of the barrel English localization. Okay. So, in a sense, you know, when you're playing something that bad, the only way you can go is up, because you can't even imagine what's worse.
So I understand that these are DS games being blown up from a tiny like 200p screen to a HD, But yeah, they need to be more careful with how they set up the fonts and the spacing and like a new aspect ratio and all that. It's just right now it's just a little bit ugly. I mean, the game itself, I don't expect it to look like a DS game, but just the font, like you can do better there.
I think we've discussed this on previous editions of the podcast, but when I went to the Steam page to look at this, I was, even though I don't think this is not new news, I was still surprised that this is a trio pack, at least on Steam, that is $40 each. I'm like, oh
yeah, it's $80 for the pack if you get them all together, and that's
it's like, oh, what? It's like, oh, what a deal! I thought this was like, I honestly thought that this was $40 for the trio. Like that makes sense. Like, oh wait, it's $40 each. Like maybe I'm just like completely have my expectations out of alignment. But I'm like, oh,
it's well, one thing to consider is that there was a number of Etrian Odyssey games on 3DS that Atlas charged $50 for. So unfortunately, it is in brand for this series, at least over the last couple of entries.
I am curious, like between 1, 2, and 3.
If you have to get one, just play 3.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, what is the suggested one if we're gonna dive?
I feel like that's like an article almost of like, if I don't want to get all 3, which one should I get?
I like the premise of that article. I don't want to.
Life's too short to play any Etrian Odyssey game other than 3.
Gotcha. Another trailer for a game that is currently undated is the upcoming Owlcat game project Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. Of course, this game doesn't have a release date yet. I don't think it's even slated for 2023 officially, even though people are hoping that it'll come out later in the year. Owlcat has been releasing a few dev diaries over the months for Rogue Trader for those that have played previous Owlcat games but aren't well versed on the Warhammer lore. The more recent trailer is one where they just go over the different locations in the game, so it's very much an environmental art trailer for this game, which is kind of interesting to see because, of course, Owlcat's more recent games are in the Pathfinder universe, and now they're working on Rogue Trader, which is set in the Warhammer 40K universe, so a much different like style of environment. And then alongside this specific dev diary video, I believe, is about a month old at this point, but we covered alongside the locations trailer a dev diary that's going over the different factions of Warhammer. And I'm like, sure, I'll watch this factions trailer. I don't know anything about Warhammer. Let's see what I learn here. And basically I learned that Warhammer both has elves and dark elves. And that's basically what I walked away with. Only they don't call them elves. They call them Asuryani and Drukhari. And if you're a Warhammer expert and you're like, that's not right, they're not elves. I'm like, they're elves. I don't know. They're humanoid creatures that have high like psychic affinity. And then there's a dark variant that are very like bloodthirsty and brutal. I'm like, okay, those are elves and dark elves in my mind. It's cool to see Owlcat going over and kind of doing these little deep dives for. I think they realize that certain people, this will be their entryway into the Warhammer universe. So it's kind of cool.
I kind of like the approach on the locations trailer. It's not like a typical trailer that's like trying to like hype you up or anything like that. It's literally just like, you want to show off some of the environments we made. You like isometric games? Come on, just take a look. Here we go. We got, this cathedral. We got some statues. It's not narrated. I'm making that up, but they're just basically showing off like, here are some of the locations.
Well, it's narrated with some like it's like narrated with some in universe kind of fluff.
But the effect is basically just like, we just want to show off some of the places we made. Here you go. I kind of like that.
And I will say that like Wrath of the Righteous, Owlcat's last game for an isometric game, is absolutely beautiful. And Rogue Trader, it's a much different environment and it's a lot more grungy. So to call that beautiful is a bit strange, but it's very well done and very well realized. As someone who doesn't have a preconception for what Warhammer is supposed to look like, so I admit that I have that deficiency, but I do think that their work is really fun to look at, and they make some pretty good looking games in my opinion. So I'm excited just on that front as well, and a locations trailer is a good excuse to kind of show it off. So hopefully we'll see this later this year, but not officially dated as far as I can tell, unless it's nested away someplace in a sneaky place, but currently not officially announced for 2023. And then finally, with no official Western announcement of any sort, we did get some more information about the upcoming Ys 10, which is releasing this year, at least in Japan. Of course, just a couple months ago, we finally got more details about the game's secondary protagonist, which is Karja. and a little bit about how the new combat system works between Adol and Karja in replacement of the last few games' party system. The update for this month is the introduction of a few characters for East 10, including that Dogi will make an appearance. He once again has quite a different look here. It's sort of more similar to his East 1 and 2 appearance, but it's still, as at least in my interpretation, a different take on the character.
He's not as jacked as in recent entries, but
yeah,
he's a more grounded Dogi, but he still looks handsome.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do just kind of appreciate that the characters do have like a different like style in each game, but I think Chow talked about this a little bit last week, or not last week. The last time we talked about East 10 with the last update, is that there is a little bit of an incongruency between the 2D art and the 3D models. The 3D models look more in line with what we've seen with East 8 and 9, but the 2D art is quite a bit different. At least in my opinion, especially for Adol. Of course, that's a little bit harder to state for the new characters. Alongside, Falcom did announce some details and some short bios for some characters specific to this game. Glenn, Rosa, and Cruz. So just a specific like cast of comrades in this particular adventure, which is very typical for Ys to have bespoke characters for each individual game. And then the final details that Falcom provided was a little bit more of the non-combat features of this mana action system. And it talks about how these can be used to both in and outside of the environment. It talks about the mana string, which is like a grappling hook, mana ride, which we have an image of Adol looking on like he's on a surfboard and can cross, bodies of water with it. And then mana burst, which has an elemental affinity based on whichever character is using it, either Adol or Karja, which can also be used to open the environment to new pathways. So this is kind of, we've seen like with like the Monstrum abilities in East 9 open up new environmental like locking keys, sort of Metroidvania type things. So it seems like this mana system here is kind of occupying that same space here in East 10 in absence of a party system. So
hey, Chow. Oh fuck! I thought Chow was back. Shit, never mind.
Oh, what were we gonna ask him? I'm curious.
Oh, Chow is back. Oh shit!
I had to use the washroom. Sorry.
It's okay. Chow, we're on this East 10 thing. Did you see the character designs for the new East 10 character people?
Everyone was already memeing it. It looked like Atelier Rise of Free.
Okay, that was where I was gonna go with it, but
Oh my god, she really does look like Claudia.
But you know the pink-haired girl, right? You know who's voicing the pink-haired girl?
The pink-haired girl? No, not yet.
Yoshino Aoyama, and you know who Yoshino Aoyama voiced? Ochi.
Oh god.
So that's why that's why the people were calling her Bochi at first, before the Famitsu came out.
Well, have you heard how she naturally sounds? She doesn't sound anything like Bochi.
Oh yeah, obviously.
It's like every character in that show, like if they talk with their normal voices, they sound nothing like what they do. Like if you hear Kita, like Hasegawa's like actual voice, it's like very deep. It's like all the characters she plays is like all this like high pitched kind of characters.
It's really funny. I'm really excited to hear like how Rosa sounds in East 10 whenever they fucking get out another trailer.
Man.
So I'm interested to see where they go. But yeah, I mean, sure, like we're kind of getting to that portion of the Falcom marketing cycle where they're kind of like detailing. They're probably going to start detailing, more minute elements to it, which is fine. Just show us the game again in motion, like for real. Like,
yeah, I think right here is kind of where my threshold ends. Like we had the introduction, some loose concepts, then we last had here's how the two protagonists work and the combat works, and now we're having like the next step in about how some of the progression works and exploration works. Once it goes more minute than this, is where I start to like, all right, let me just wait until I actually see footage. Or
you don't want to know more about the item shopkeeper?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear like how item upgrades work or how shops work.
There is only one ideal item shopkeeper. It is, I don't even remember the name anymore.
Nice, great contribution.
Okay. Best blacksmith, Catherine. Okay, best blacksmith. There we go.
All right, okay. You didn't entirely redeem yourself, but you got something with that.
Yeah, so of course that's slated to release later this year in Japan, and we'll likely, hopefully, pray to see it at some point next year here in the
I have
West.
a question. Did anyone pick up Open Fagana, the Switch version?
No,
No.
I didn't have a reason to. I can just play it on PC.
Yeah.
Well, I just wonder if anyone wanted to see if there's enough content where all the characters are actually voiced now, or if Ado's actually talking for real.
Well, it seems
just
like
wanna
I feel like if you can follow your hearts and dreams and make that dream a reality for yourself,
Well, you could always play Use Free back in the day, and he actually talks there.
That hasn't been formally announced for West either, right?
No,
Nope. So
now that I think about it, even with like Rune Factory, okay, so I was playing Rune Factory Free Special. I imported it, but how would that game even work when they localize it? I mean, Natsume translated the game back in the day. Would they able to like, reuse all their assets, or would they have to like retranslate the entire game again?
well, that'll be the case for the other special releases too, right?
Well, no, because 4 was actually done by Xseed, and
Oh, I didn't know that.
so is like 5 and other games, or Frontier.
Well, it
I thought-
depends. It's possible that Marvelous Japan owns the rights to the English license, to the English translation that was done for them, and then they can like give it to whoever. Possibly. That's just sometimes the people who do the localization don't own it.
Yeah, this could also be the case where they just kind of relocalize it, like they did with Muramasa, for example.
It's like, we could play this entire game with a localization.
Okay, but what was the original localization like? Like, was it good, bad, okay?
The original, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's full of charm. Let's just say that. A lot of like character charms, though you don't really get it in the Japanese. It's definitely not like an Xseed style. I think they do take a lot too much liberties, so you might not like it, or depending how you look at it. I would say it's kind of like the level below working design, where working design's too far in taking liberties. It's kind of like the level before that. Let's just say that.
Okay.
That's how I treat the original, and I think that's kind of like a good balance. Not too far, and not
I do like how frequently Chow imports Rune Factory game months ahead of Western release. Like has been on this podcast, because that releases, I believe, in September here in the West, but released in March, of course, in Japan. So
I was a true fan. Okay.
It has very good reasoning back in the day. When you play it in the DS, they only give you 2 save slots. So here, I would play the Japanese version where I married 2 wives, and then I play the English version and I marry the other 2 wives, and then the other 6 gets left alone because, well, I don't have enough save slots. Well, there you go.
I don't know why, but my brain was like, for some reason, I was expecting you to say, like, I play a Japanese version and I marry 2 wives, and I play the English version and I marry 2 dudes. I don't know, like, gotta run the gamut.
That would be an option, if that was Rune Factory 4.
Okay.
But that is not an option in the English. I mean, in the first game, sadly.
Yeah. And then the last headline that I have here was a late edition, and that is that I like how our last headline always ends up like on a somewhat sad note, but that is that in this case it's not a mobile game shutting down or a games as a service game shutting down. It's that CyberConnect 2's Montreal studio will be closing at the end of July. CyberConnect 2, we've been talking about a little bit in terms typically in like Fuga Melodies of Steel has been their more recent projects that we've been covering. Based on my reading of this press release, it seems like their Montreal studio was more of a support studio that developed tools and technologies, but wasn't explicitly like helming the development of a particular game, but was just supporting their other studios. That was my interpretation here. I don't know if James or Josh had a different interpretation of this studio closure announcement.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly. I was like you. I wasn't too sure like what their like main role was. Like, because they, obviously it's hard to get a read on that. Like, I guess I wrongly thought before going to this that like I thought they were kind of like the main hub for like in-house like localization efforts for CyberConnect 2 projects. Like Fuga, for example, is entirely in-house. Like I thought the reason like why it got like a French like localization was because of the Montreal studio. I don't I don't think that's the case though. Like after talking about it some more, so I assume this wouldn't be too much of a big impact now whenever Fuga 3 comes around, whether like the other trilogy of Vengeance titles which are separate from the Fuga series comes about too. I assume that won't affect it too much, but I don't know exactly either. What do you think, James, on this?
I just don't know. Yeah, because I do know that Fuga itself is profitable now because they got enough money from like Microsoft for Game Pass. It's fine, but it's like anything that CyberConnect 2 does after that, I just don't know, because like they opened up that Montreal studio before COVID, back when they also thought that they were going to be working on like Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was going to be a support studio helping the main team work on that. And then the aspirations were eventually to expand it into like create your own titles. But
I remember not too long ago, James, that like the Montreal studio is also like actively like seeking people to hire as well.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And like, I remember the Anime Expo that like we went to. Like, they were also like, "Hey, if you're interested in working with us," like they're actively like recruiting like at the Anime Expo that you went to.
To be fair, that recruitment thing, they were specifically talking about their Fukuoka office.
Okay, was it that? Not
yeah, and they were very clear that they want to hire. They at least then, and I assume like it's still like something that they act when they're hiring. They look for. They do want to hire foreigners, like to like the main company offices in Japan. I mean, hell, it worked out for them with Fuga. Like they got to like well, we'll see how Fuga 2 turns out. I'm sure it'll be just as good as the first one, if not better. But yeah, I mean, like critically, that was a success. Like people enjoy that game. People love that game. So, and that was I'm not sure if he was French or French Canadian, but yeah, director. So. I don't know. I'm sure like since they actively court like people from different backgrounds, even for like the Japanese side of things, they probably figured that it wasn't worth keeping the actual Montreal studio around, which sucks for anyone that was there. But when you look at what's happened since they opened that studio, it's not like it doesn't make sense why they made the decision.
If someone wants to be a real hero, okay, before this studio closed down, there's any original FF7 remake assets that CyberConnect 2 worked on?
I am so curious about that. Like, I want to see what it looked like. Is it like that motorcycle game that they put on the cell phone or something like that? I don't know. Like,
I just say there's any remaining assets of that project in that studio. If anyone wants to be, like a legend for the sake of preservation of video game history,
I'm curious what it was. Is this such a trash fire that Square Enix is like, well, we gotta take it back in our own hands. We don't want this,
But I'm not saying I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just like putting the idea out there, but I'm not suggesting anything. Just saying.
Well, that covers us for news this week on the podcast. So a little bit short, a lot of gameplay trailers for upcoming games. We actually have a few like fairly significant releases coming out over the next 7 days before next week's podcast. We've got Live Alive coming to PC. We've got Sunbreak coming to PlayStation and Xbox. Honkai Star Rail. Maybe Chow is interested in that one coming out on the 26th. But we'll likely start off next week's podcast, of course, with our thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles 3's DLC. With one, I'll put a footnote here that we might delay a week if people are hesitant on talking about it, if they want to complete it first and we haven't completed it in time. So we'll play it by ear. We don't know like the scope or extent or how long it's going to be, but that'll be a highlight whenever we do get to talk about it, either next week or the week after. And then we'll roll right into May, of course, with Zelda and all the other major releases into May.
You see that? You see what just happened? Ryan already totally forgot Jedi Survivor. Once Xenoblade 3 was announced, DLC was announced, like, what the fuck is Jedi Survivor?
Well, Jedi Survivor I actually don't have on our RPG list here because it's kind of occupying that weird space. What is the release date of Jedi Survivor?
The 28th.
So that's also this week. All right, so maybe we'll earmark time for that next week as well. We'll see. So that'll be a fun pairing, Xenoblade and Jedi, because like oil and vinegar or something.
I mean, Rex has 2 lightsabers, pretty much.
That is true. But so it's kind of interesting because oftentimes we go into these podcasts not 100% sure what we're going to talk about in terms of which game we'll be talking about in the upcoming weeks. But we're kind of going into a release schedule where we have a few major hitters that we know we definitely want to hit up when they release and get talking about them. So we'll be hitting those up as we go into the summer months here. But as we get to the end of this podcast, thank you all so much for listening. We have all of those features that we called out earlier in the podcast, the Rise of 3 review, the Advance Wars 1 and 2 bootcamp review, James's Wild Hearts feature is up on the site, as well as our little kind of preview op-ed for the Pixel Remasters up on the site for the Switch and PlayStation 4 versions. We have all the gameplay trailers that we talked about up on our site as well. I do also want to do one quick shout out, of course, for those Pixel Remasters, is that Adam, alongside a lot of other staff members, have put together several different guides of different lengths up on the site. Whether you're looking for just kind of like a bare bones walkthrough or a very specific thing, we have a lot of those kind of put together for those that are either playing through those games for the first time or are revisiting them as they release on modern consoles. So we have a lot of that. A lot of work's gone into that for some of those articles up on the site. So I wanted to at least make sure that we call those out here. You can join the RPG site Discord by hitting the link at our top of our homepage, the link on the bottom of our YouTube videos, or going to discord.gg/RPG site. You can find RPG site on all the social media platforms on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast, where it seems like we'll be discussing likely Xenoblade Chronicles 3's DLC and Jedi Survivor. So thank you all so much for listening. If you've got any feedback, let us know in the comments of our YouTube channel, of our site post, or on whatever podcast service of choice. And we will be back next week. Until you hear from us then, stay safe and take care. We will talk to you all next time.
All right, I'm having second thoughts. Delete the episode.